Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Samantha and Tessara Crespi. David Crespi comes from a family known for its success and respect. He is from Sacramento, California, and both he and his brother, along with their father, graduated from California State University. David earned an accounting degree with honors in 1983. His older brother, John, is the pride of the family, having become a professor of economics at Kansas State University. With his excellent academic performance, David easily found a job at a local bank, where he quickly rose to the position of CFO. However, the bank eventually closed. He then worked as a manager at a mortgage company in Sacramento. David has 2 children from his first marriage. However, his life took a difficult turn when his first wife died of a brain tumor. David devoted himself to providing for his children during this trying time. Fortunately, he soon met Kim, a woman he had known since college. Their friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship, and they began living together in 1994. Kim married David and adopted his children. In 1997, they welcomed a son, and 4 years later, they had twins, Tessara and Samantha. In total, David has 5 children with 2 women. In 2001, David moved to a new and promising bank, prompting his family to relocate to Matthews, a small town in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. By 2006, David Crespi was a vice president at a bank and lived with his family in a comfortable 3-story house in a prosperous area of Matthews. They had lived in this quiet neighborhood for nearly 5 years, which was considered an ideal place to raise children. The family shared a strong, loving bond and maintained a warm relationship with one another. David was regarded as a caring and active family man. They were actively involved in their local church, where David served on the finance committee. To many, it seemed that David had achieved his dream. What appeared to be a happy life actually concealed deeper problems. From a young age, David struggled with mental health issues. On the surface, he seemed to be a kind, devoted, successful, hard-working, and intelligent husband and father. However, he often suffered from severe bouts of depression that would come and go without warning. His condition worsened after the death of his first wife, but it only began to improve when Kim entered his life. She did her best to support him, and they both believed that this would help him overcome his challenges. Unfortunately, it was not enough. David's mental health issues began when he was 20 years old. At that time, he faced typical challenges in love and difficulties in planning for the future, which left him in a state of sadness. Adult life turned out to be more difficult than he had anticipated. Despite this, David still managed to excel in everything he did and worked tirelessly, not realizing that his success came at a high cost. As a young man, David did not seek help and preferred to solve problems on his own. As an adult, his depression often stemmed from the increased demands of his job and the responsibilities he assumed. His family was aware of his difficulties, and his colleagues noticed when he occasionally fell into a state of depression. However, David usually recovered quite quickly. There were no serious consequences for his work life. People understood his situation. He could take a day off, but his colleagues covered for him and provided sick leave when necessary. Their support seemed justified because, while his depression was in remission, David excelled in his field. The situation became increasingly serious. David was a devout Catholic, as was his entire family, according to his faith. End life was considered a sin. Despite this belief, David frequently contemplated end life during his time as vice president and even attempted it several times without success. During this period, David chose to spend time outdoors, searching for a suitable place to end his life instead of working. His wife tried to intervene and save him during these moments. After each attempt, David promised his family that he would not try to commit end life again. David struggled with depression that he could not control. Simply promising himself not to harm himself did not help him dispel his dark thoughts. his frustration grew. Instead of feeling like harming himself, he began to have thoughts about harming others. One time, when David and Kim were stopped at a traffic light, he seriously considered driving into a crowd. His wife thought he was joking. Unaware of how sincere his feelings were at this time, David tried several prescription medications, but they were ineffective. His attempts to deal with his mental health issues on his own made him paranoid and withdrawn. He became increasingly anxious about losing his job and going bankrupt. Often imagining the worst-case scenarios, Kim encouraged him to see a psychiatrist, who prescribed him antidepressants. David agreed and committed to the treatment regimen the doctor gave him. David had been on one medication for years, but it caused him to gain weight, which frustrated him. Annoyed by this side effect, he decided to stop taking the medication and try something else. He returned to the psychiatrist, hoping to adjust his treatment regimen for better results. By 2006, he was very familiar with his mental health problems, which had become more frequent and intense during these times. He was haunted by thoughts of harming others. David often thought about ending his life voluntarily, but because of his promise not to harm himself, he considered harming others instead. Although he saw his doctor regularly, he never revealed these feelings. Hoping that a prescription medication would help him manage his difficulties, he feared losing everything he had built. He understood that if his doctor knew about his obsessive thoughts, it could lead to serious consequences, such as hospitalization, loss of his job, or separation from his wife and children. He tried not to think about harming others and fought against these thoughts. David's last appointment with a psychiatrist was on January 19, 2006. Shortly before the tragic events occurred, the psychiatrist prescribed new medication, believing that David was struggling with sleep problems and anxiety. He had also recently changed his previous medication, which could cause weight gain. The psychiatrist did not notice anything unusual. David was very good at hiding his emotions and preferred to rely on himself. On the morning of January 20, 2006, David's family was at home. Kim, David, and their 5-year-old twins, Samantha and Tessera, whom David adored, were all together. David was on sick leave due to his battle with depression. At that time, everything seemed normal, and there was no sign that anything was wrong. At 11:30 a.m., David received a call from his mother. It was a routine check-in. She was aware of his mental health issues and called at the same time every day to see how he was doing, and if he needed any support. They talked for about 15 minutes, during which David reassured her that everything was fine. His 3 older children were at school at the time at 12:15 p.m., while Samantha and Tessera were having lunch. Kim was looking after them. She felt confident that nothing would happen to the children because David loved them very much. She believed that they would be safe with him. Kim had gone out to get a haircut after lunch. David worked on the computer, but then took a break to spend time with his daughters. He suggested they play hide and seek, and they scattered to find hiding places around the house. David went into the kitchen and laid out some knives on the table. He then began to search for the twins. He saw Samantha first. She was smiling and unaware of the dark thoughts in his mind. Deciding to end the game, he quietly took her to the kitchen. Suddenly, he picked her up and placed her on the kitchen table. He took a knife and began to attack Samantha. The little girl screamed and struggled, and then she stopped breathing. Hearing strange noises, Tessera came out of hiding and saw her father attacking Samantha. Even though she was only 5 years old, she sensed that something terrible was happening. Fearing for her own safety, she hid on the second floor of the house. Unfortunately, Tessera was easily discovered in the bathroom of the master bedroom. The little girl begged David not to hurt her, but David ignored her cries. He pinned her to the floor and began to attack her with a knife. Tessera cried, screamed, and fought fiercely against her father, but all in vain. Once a loving father, he had now left his 2 young daughters lifeless. David then considered end life, but ultimately decided against it. Instead of running away, he showered, changed clothes, and called 911. During the call, he calmly confessed that he had killed his two daughters and attempted CPR. Although he believed it was useless, as they were already dead, he answered the police's questions clearly. Providing his details, his phone number, and his wife's location, he appeared calm rather than distressed and requested emergency assistance, expressing his desire to end his life. After the call ended, the police quickly arrived at David's home. David's home is located on Creek Road in an affluent area. Where his family lives in a villa, it was surprising that such a tragic event could happen in a place known for its prosperity. When the police arrived, David was found sitting outside the house, waiting for them and for his wife Kim, who was still at the beauty salon. He surrendered and accompanied the police back to the house. Kim later returned home and learned of the situation. Initially, Kim feared that her husband had committed end life, but when she learned the truth, she was shocked. The police placed David under 24-hour surveillance and provided him with specialized clothing designed to prevent self-harm. Removing any dangerous objects from his immediate vicinity, the case attracted considerable public attention, as a prominent and wealthy man faced the possibility of the death penalty, which is legal in North Carolina. It is reported that David may reach a plea deal with the prosecution if he admits to 2 counts of first-degree murder. The prosecutor's office will agree not to pursue the death penalty. As a result, David could face life in prison without parole. Many feel that this sentence is too lenient for the deaths of Samantha and Tessara, 2 innocent girls. During questioning, David mentioned that he had been dealing with depression and suggested that his actions were influenced by a new medication prescribed by his doctor. David has spoken openly about his illness, seemingly trying to shift the prosecutor's focus to his condition, which he believes caused the tragic events. He stated that he had struggled with depression for years and had finally reached a point where he could no longer bear it. Over the past few months, his condition had worsened significantly. He revealed that he had intended to harm strangers with his car, but also admitted that he had darker thoughts about his wife and 5 children while they slept. Amid his financial struggles, he was overwhelmed by the fear of losing his job as a bank vice president. He felt disillusioned by his inability to provide for his wife and children, which left him feeling unstable. On that day, he heard voices in his head telling him that there was no future, that everything was ruined, and that he had to kill his daughters. David believed that the twins were also suffering from depression, which was why they were not attending kindergarten. He eventually came to the disturbing conclusion that killing Samantha and Tessara might ease his own pain and prevent his mental health from deteriorating further. Kim shocked many by forgiving and supporting David. Despite his violent actions, she felt the death penalty was too harsh and believed it would not bring her children back to life. Despite her heartache over the tragedy, Kim has repeatedly told the media that executing David would only cause further harm to the family. She expressed relief that her husband did not commit end life before the police arrived. Kim believes that his actions stemmed from mental health issues that he could not control, including severe depression and psychosis. She remains hopeful that he will eventually recover and return to the loving and calm person he once was. The Supreme Court is reviewing the death penalty. Some believe that David deserves the death penalty for killing his 2 children. However, the prosecutor was reluctant to pursue this option because it would be difficult to convince all 12 jurors. As a result, the inquest continues to investigate more disturbing evidence beyond David's confession. David's attorneys have prepared a strong argument against the death penalty, emphasizing his long history of severe mental illness, which has spanned more than 2 decades. Prior to this tragic event, David had no criminal record. He was a devoted family man and a respectable citizen. There was no history of aggressive behavior in his past, and he had never harmed his wife or children. As Kim and other family members confirmed, the defense argued that on January 20, David's mental illness led to the tragic deaths of his 2 children. The attorneys, along with all of David's relatives, believed that he was experiencing a psychotic episode at the time of the incident. Kim stated that he had been working hard for years to control his mental health issues and had been successful. They had consulted with professionals, and he had been prescribed medication. However, Kim felt that the treatment he received was not effective enough over the years. The family continued to seek help and adhered to the treatment plan, ensuring that he took his medication as prescribed. A psychological evaluation revealed that David had more serious mental health problems than initially thought, rather than just depression and anxiety. He was diagnosed with psychosis. It became clear that the medications prescribed were not appropriate for his condition. Several years before the incident, David had been diagnosed with genital cancer and had been successfully treated on the day of the tragedy. He was scheduled for a follow-up appointment. His attorneys presented medical documents showing that he had been prescribed several medications, one for depression, another for anxiety, and a third to help him sleep. While on the antidepressants, David gained more than 20 kg and had difficulty breathing, which forced him to stop taking the medication. His doctor then prescribed another medication in January, but it did not resolve his sleep problems. He finally returned to the doctor just one day before the murder. Medical records show that David's treating physician removed his sedative and sleeping pills and prescribed a different sleeping pill instead. After this change, David began to notice alterations in his mental state, impairing his ability to think clearly. The day before the twins were murdered, he became delirious and acted erratically, experiencing extreme mood swings. This exacerbated his anxiety about not being able to provide for his family. However, management at the bank where he worked described David as having an excellent work record, with no indication that he was in danger of losing his job. Despite this reassurance, David's mental state left him vulnerable to irrational fears. He worried that he might not receive a bonus from the bank, recalling that he had earned $45 the year before, but doubting that he would receive the same amount again. However, he later discovered that the bank had approved a large bonus during this difficult time. David was not in a clear state of mind and could not think rationally while awaiting the hearing in the case of Samantha and Tessara's murder. Kim visited her husband frequently. She repeatedly expressed her deep faith and love for him, believing that one day they would overcome the challenges caused by his illness and avoid such terrible tragedies. Kim only knew David as a kind and loving person. She believed that inadequate treatment led to the deaths of their children and the pain the family endured afterward. The scene of the crime was tragic. It is hard to imagine the pain Kim felt when she returned from the beauty salon to find the police and paramedics carrying her daughter's bodies. In fact, David's troubled thoughts began long before these tragic events. At the time, David was being treated with prescription medications. The initial treatment regimen helped control his negative thoughts to some extent, but things changed when adjustments were made. Experts later concluded that the new drugs had caused acute psychosis, according to David's own confession. When Samantha and Tessara were only 1 year old, he had thoughts of harming them. One day, while walking with the girls in the backyard, he hid a weapon in his pocket. Fortunately, he regained his composure and realized that he needed to stop. He convinced himself that he could overcome his challenges and that his family's financial situation would improve. David later returned to the doctor, but avoided discussing his thoughts of harming his children. Instead, he vaguely mentioned having bad thoughts about harming others and expressed his fear of losing his children and family by withholding information. He likely misled his doctors. As a result, he was prescribed medications that he had taken previously, which led to weight gain. In his confession, David admitted that, for many years, he had often felt like harming a family member, but he had been able to control these impulses until now. He believed that he had everything under control and could never actually act on the harmful thoughts. David recounted that after his wife got a haircut one morning, he was working on his computer when the obsessive thought returned. It urged him to kill his children. He thought that if he did so, all his worries would disappear because he would have no one to care for. David realized that his mental problems were related to his actions. During his initial interrogations, David responded coldly. When asked why he killed both girls instead of just one, he explained that because they were twins, they needed to die together. However, the situation changed when David received comprehensive treatment. It was only then that he understood the severity of his crime. He admitted that he had never shared his thoughts about killing his children. His wife, Kim, did not fully understand the gravity of her husband's condition. David's doctor was not held responsible after the tragedy. Citing David's failure to provide accurate information, the doctor was unaware of many of David's hidden struggles, which prevented him from fully assessing the situation. Furthermore, all medications have side effects that can vary from person to person, and doctors cannot predict such severe reactions. David received support and treatment while in prison, which had a positive impact on him. During his preliminary hearing, he began to understand the extent of his responsibility for his actions and fully admitted his guilt. Psychiatrists confirmed that he was fit to stand trial. David's family was shocked by what had happened. His father had seen him just a week before the tragic event. He appeared healthy and showed no signs of impending disaster. On July 30, 2006, the hearings took place. Ultimately, David Crespi reached a plea deal and pleaded guilty, while the prosecutor's office chose not to pursue the death penalty. This decision caused considerable controversy, dividing public opinion. With one group calling for the death penalty, the trial was brief, and the jury sentenced David Crespi to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The trial was short but filled with deep emotion. David's family cried, and he struggled to hold back tears as he came to terms with the pain his actions had caused. He felt he would be haunted by guilt for the rest of his life. Even the police officers who had arrived at the scene that day were in tears. A young officer went upstairs and discovered Tessera's body. He checked for a pulse, hoping she was still alive. The police carried the injured child down the stairs, praying that she would survive. However, when the doctors examined the body, it was clear that she had died from her injuries. What the police felt as a pulse may have been his own heartbeat. This story raises many questions. Was David truly unaware of what was happening at the time? Were his actions influenced by a psychotic episode? He appeared normal when he talked to his mother and wife and went to work. However, his actions were completely different. When his wife, Kim, left the house, everything seemed normal. But he caused a massacre right afterward. He considered end life, but decided against it and tried to calm down. So why didn't he try to control himself in the moment when he killed the child? Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Brian King and Christina Benjamin. On July 29, 1993, it was a hot day in Alice County, Texas, USA. Despite the heat, a road crew was working on Cato Road to prepare the ground for asphalt. During their break, one worker leveling gravel spotted something unusual in the thick bushes across the Smith Creek River. The object, about 100 meters away, had a grayish color that made it stand out from the surrounding greenery. Curiosity prompted the worker and a colleague to climb over a barbed wire fence to investigate the mysterious object. As they got closer, about 10 meters from the object, a foul stench hit their noses. The stench became unbearable, and they covered their noses with their clothes. As they got closer, they discovered that the object was a corpse. It appeared to be a she, probably of school age. The gruesome sight showed torn flesh covered in flies, but the most shocking aspect was that the girl's head and arms were missing. The workers quickly notified their supervisor and decided to call the police. Without cell phones and far from the nearest town, they decided to leave one worker with the body while the other went to a small neighboring town to seek help. The police arrived shortly after being notified and began examining the scene for evidence and any dismembered body parts. However, a more gruesome discovery awaited them just 300 meters away. They discovered the body of a young girl and also found the body of a young man who appeared to be about 15 years old. He was lying face down on the riverbank, about 10 meters from the bridge. Unlike the girl, he was still dressed and had not been dismembered. It appeared that he had been thrown into the river, and the current had washed him to shore. Retrieving the young man's body was much more difficult than accessing the girl's remains, so the police called the city fire department for assistance. With the help of special equipment, they were able to reach his body. Meanwhile, a team of forensic experts remained at the scene to investigate and collect evidence before it got too dark. Police worked the scene until the sun went down. They focused on the area where the bodies were found, and the medical examiner analyzed the victims. The expert determined that the first body, the girl, was that of a teenage girl who had been stabbed multiple times. She had been shot twice in the back with a .22 caliber gun, and her head had been severed from her body. It was likely with a large hunting knife or possibly an axe. The body showed numerous severe wounds on the abdomen, thighs, and genitals, with some resembling intricate hieroglyphs carved into the skin. There was a long, deep cut on the stomach, similar to those made during an autopsy. The criminal expert noted signs of extreme cruelty inside the cavity, including torn intestines and severed hands. Bruises that looked like marks from handcuffs suggested the victims had been restrained for a period before the torture started. Additionally, both of the girls' breasts had been removed. Experts believe the victims' bodies had been dead for 2 days, judging by their level of decomposition. He had been shot twice in the head with a similar weapon. There were no signs of a beating or struggle on his body. Police believe the attacker may have severed the girl's arms and head to make identification more difficult. However, he may not have realized that advanced DNA identification methods were available. However, the condition of the bodies and their decomposition could make this identification quite difficult. Forensic scientists found that the girl had been sexually assaulted. The high temperatures had caused significant decomposition, making it difficult to determine the exact details of the crime. Police believe the attack was carried out in anger or extreme hatred. However, the presence of fly larvae allowed researchers to determine a more precise time of death for both teens. The victims were tortured on the night of July 26th to 27th. To support their findings, the forensic expert consulted a forensic entomologist who studies the growth of insects on decomposing bodies and the damage they cause. Ultimately, the lab staff agreed that the time of death had been accurately determined. However, some errors regarding the timeline of the investigation had to be cleared up. Since the boy's hands and head were intact, forensic experts were puzzled as to how he escaped the same fate as the girl. They questioned why his hands were not cut off, as this would have made it easier for the criminal to conceal the victim's identity. The killer likely thought that the boy's body would be lost in the current or would drown, making it difficult to find. This might explain why he didn't dismember the body, or perhaps the body fell into the water by accident. The police believed that the dismemberment was not meant to mislead the investigation but might have been motivated by something more disturbing. Many serial killers keep trophies from their crimes. It's possible that the girl's head became part of such a gruesome collection because the attack resembled that of a maniac. The police's first goal was to find the girl's clothes. During their search, they found a clump of light-colored hair caught in the barbed wire that the workers had crossed. Police believed that this hair might have come from the decapitated victim. Unfortunately, the mutilated body had no identifying marks. However, in the boy's pocket, they found a book subscription card from a town registered to Brian King. They were able to confirm the details at the library, but it was closed for the night, so they would have to wait until morning. The next morning, the police station received a report about the disappearance of 2 teenagers from a small town, the same one where the library was located. The boy's name was Brian King, and the girl's name was Christina Benjamin. After receiving the report, police visited the boy's home and showed the wallet they had found to the father, who answered the door. He confirmed that it belonged to his 14-year-old son, Brian, who was missing, along with his 13-year-old stepdaughter, Christina, who had blonde hair. Days before the incident, around midnight, the children's father was awakened by a suspicious car that honked its horn and drove off. During this time, Brian was sleeping in a tent outside the house, which was unusual for a teenager. The car returned just 10 to 15 minutes later. The father noticed his son talking calmly with the driver and assumed it was one of Brian's friends. He spotted a man with blonde hair in the back seat but couldn't see the driver. Feeling reassured, he went to the bathroom. When he came back, the car and his son were gone. The father thought Brian had gone out with friends and planned to discuss this odd situation with him in the morning, so he went to bed. However, Brian never returned home, and it was later discovered that Christina had also disappeared. The parents started contacting friends and acquaintances of their children, but no one had seen the teenagers. The family had a younger girl who shared a room with Christina. She reported that on the night they disappeared, Brian entered their room and woke up Christina. He mentioned that some cool guys had arrived in a car and invited them to a party. Christina agreed, and they both left home together. Eventually, their parents reported the children missing to the police. They noted that before their disappearance, Christina had injured her foot during a school class. Upon further investigation, it was found that Christina's hair was on the forensic expert's desk. She had light hair, which was compared to strands found on a fence and those collected from home combs. The results showed that the hairs did not match, indicating they could belong to a likely killer, who also appeared to have light hair. With no evidence available, forensic experts had to rely on alternative methods. They discovered fibers on Brian's shoes that matched the material used in the carpets of Japanese cars. Brian's father provided a description of the car he saw, mentioning that it was dark in color. However, his description lacked detail, as he could not recall the specific model or license plate number. Police were particularly puzzled by the brutality that Christina had suffered. If this was not a personal hate crime, it would suggest they were dealing with a very dangerous person who was likely to commit further acts of violence. They speculate that the motive behind such cruelty could have been sexual. After interviewing the friends of the murdered teenagers, the police learned that on the evening of her disappearance, Christina was supposed to meet a man named Jason. All the witnesses who spoke to the police pointed to Jason Massey as the only person capable of committing such a crime. One of his friends revealed that Jason had long ago turned to a darker lifestyle. He had dropped out of school, never held a job, frequently killed animals, and kept their heads as trophies. Jason did not hide his disturbing interests. He once made a chilling comment, expressing enjoyment in saying that if a serial killer were active in the area, it would be him. Although he liked to boast about such things, people generally did not take him seriously. Jason was described as having long, curly blonde hair and was 20 years old at the time of these events. His mother was indifferent towards him, even hiding food in his room. The family frequently moved, faced evictions due to unpaid rent, and often lived in unstable conditions. Jason had a difficult childhood, living in a car and facing a harsh environment. He was addicted to alcohol and drugs, bullied weaker children, and started harming animals. His father was also addicted to drugs and treated him badly. During Jason's school years, his father was incarcerated for a long time, but it had a serious impact on his mental health. Jason was involved in various petty crimes, including stalking. There was an incident where he killed a girl's dog because she rejected his advances, and he continued to stalk her, leaving her extremely scared. As a child, Jason loved his younger brother but grew to hate adults. As an adult, his feelings for women became entwined with violent fantasies. He also believed in ghosts and thought he could hear them speaking to him, influenced by religious stories told to him by his devout grandmother. The year the two teenagers were murdered, he was sentenced to 12 months in prison after a police officer discovered a dead cat and some suspicious cutting tools in his car. Unfortunately, he was released early and never faced the consequences of his actions. Police reported that when Jason was arrested, he was wearing handcuffs and appeared to be enjoying the situation. Jason did not resist arrest and confidently stated that he would be released soon. After searching his home, police found numerous newspaper clippings about the murders, a collection of adult videos, a box filled with handcuffs, and knives that had traces of blood. His room also contained books on satanic themes. In the Jason's car, a brown 1982 Subaru, forensic experts discovered what appeared to be blood stains, particularly concentrated in the trunk. They also found duct tape with light hair that did not belong to the Jason, a receipt for ammunition, a hunting knife, and a brown carpet with fibers matching those found at the crime scene. During questioning, the Jason denied any involvement in the crimes. He assumed he knew where the severed body parts were and even offered to lead the police to them. They searched the forest for several hours together but found nothing. After returning to the station, Jason requested a lawyer and stopped cooperating with the police. Soon after, the police received an anonymous tip suggesting that Jason was the only one who could be responsible for the teenagers' massacre. Later, a witness emerged who had spent much of the evening of July 26 with Jason. She stated that he had left home acting strangely aggressive, likely due to drug use. She noticed he had handcuffs and a gun, which made her uneasy, but she didn't report it to the police because she was afraid of him. The girl later said that Jason owned a .22 caliber pistol, the same type used to shoot the Brian and Christina, and that he had purchased ammunition shortly before killing the two children. DNA evidence from blood and hair found in his car matched the victims. Police gathered more and more circumstantial evidence linking Jason to the massacre, while he had no alibi. That evening, his friends and acquaintances found him strange, and some even felt afraid of him. A teacher from the school Jason attended said he was fixated on disturbing images, including satanic symbols. He often spoke about murders, which frightened some of his classmates. At that point, there was no solid evidence against him. To establish Jason's connection, the FBI was called in to create a criminal profile using photographs from the crime scene. During the investigation, it was discovered that Jason's mother had discovered several of Jason's notebooks the previous June. These notebooks contained disturbing content, including a list of girls Jason wanted to kill, with detailed descriptions of the violent acts he fantasized about. Christina was at the top of the list. The alarming nature of the diary prompted Jason's mother to seek help from a psychotherapy clinic after reading them. A psychiatrist assessed Jason and concluded that he posed a danger to himself and society, leading to his admission for intensive care and further observation. However, not all medical professionals agreed with the diagnosis of antisocial disorder. Most doctors, after conducting evaluations, opposed this diagnosis, resulting in Jason's release from the clinic without further treatment. Jason's writings became crucial evidence in the case, as they showed his obsession with thoughts of murder and torture directed at young girls for several years. He claimed that his desire to kill was motivated purely by sexual arousal. On March 17, 1994, Jason was charged with 2 counts of premeditated murder, yet he maintained his innocence. 3 weeks after the charges were filed, the hearings commenced. The prosecutor's office intended to pursue the death penalty for the defendant, which is permitted under Texas law. The hearing started on September 28, 1994. The prosecution alleged that in mid-July 1993, Jason confided in a friend that he had obtained ammunition, knives, and handcuffs, and that he had devised a plan to kidnap Christina from her home. He used Brian to entice both teenagers into a car, claiming they were going to a party. Once inside, He quickly disposed of the boy and shot him in the car. Christina attempted to flee, but he injured her, caught her, and proceeded to torment her. The prosecution worried that Jason could evade justice since the public defender argued that the investigation was biased. The police focused only on Jason as a suspect after hearing about a mysterious individual, neglecting to consider other possibilities. The defense lawyer pointed out to the jury that the evidence and assumptions made by the prosecution needed further investigation. Jason's sister testified during the trial, sharing details about their challenging childhood. They often attended school unwashed, beaten, and hungry. As a result, Jason struggled to focus on his studies, despite his efforts. However, her testimony backfired when the prosecution pointed out that, despite their hardships, his sister managed to lead a decent life without committing violence. This was argued as a reason why Jason's background couldn't justify his cruel actions. The prosecution's team included a forensic expert and a forensic entomologist, who provided a thorough report on Christina's autopsy and the severe injuries she endured. Their findings indicated a brutal and unrestrained act of violence, suggesting that allowing Jason to leave the courtroom would be a grave injustice. One of the witnesses for the prosecution was Chris Nowlin, the same friend who was driving the car that transported the teenagers from their home. He chose to cooperate with the prosecution by testifying against Jason in exchange for immunity from criminal charges related to his involvement. Jason convinces his friend Chris to meet his girlfriend. Jason lies that he has been dating Christina since high school. When they reach a secluded area near a bridge, where Jason reveals his dark intentions to Chris. He plans to take Christina and Brian into the woods, kill them, and attack the girl. Chris dismisses Jason's words, as he often jokes about such things and never carries them out. Jason's former classmate testified that he had been stalking Christina for an extended period. After she rejected his advances in 7th grade, he killed her dog out of revenge and used its blood to stain her parents' car. The stalker also sent her disturbing photos of decapitated women, claiming this was how she would end up. A gun store salesman confirmed that he sold ammunition to Jason, which was later matched to the ammunition used in the murders. The day after the crime, Jason went to the wash to clean the car, but forensic experts discovered important evidence there. According to Jason's mother, he had joined a religious community shortly before the massacre, and she believed he was genuinely trying to change his ways. However, diary entries presented in court painted a different picture. They revealed that he was actually planning the crime. On the day of the hearing, a tourist was exploring the woods near where the teenagers were found murdered and stumbled upon an old, rusty refrigerator. Curious, he approached and opened the refrigerator, and was horrified to discover 30 animal skulls inside. He also found 4 red and yellow skulls in plastic bags. The skulls were accompanied by diaries written in a strange, messy handwriting, titled The Book of Murders. The diaries, which began in 1989 and ended on the day of the 1993 murders of Christina and Brian, detailed his grisly experiments with animals and outlined his plans for Christina, which he then carried out exactly as described. He had previously made attempts to commit murder but had failed, which frustrated him. His violent urges were partly driven by his hatred for his mother and a desire to kill her. Additionally, his grandmother often told him stories about demons, which may have shaped his thoughts. This evidence led the prosecutor's office to conclude that Christina's murder was premeditated. Jason described himself as a killing machine in his diaries. After both the prosecution and defense delivered their closing statements, the jury began deliberating the verdict. After 3 hours, they found Jason Massey guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The next step was to evaluate the aggravating and mitigating circumstances to determine whether the death penalty was appropriate. The prosecution presented evidence from Jason's own diary, which detailed his gruesome actions, including the murders of 4 cats, 7 dogs, and numerous calves. He had a disturbing obsession with collecting animal heads as trophies. Testimonies from a few of Jason's friends revealed that he viewed acts of cruelty as a display of power and wanted to showcase it. The diary entries also indicated that he had no intention of stopping his violent behavior. One of his last entries expressed a desire to become the most notorious serial killer in the United States, claiming that he planned to kill over the next 20 years. It took the jury just 15 minutes to decide on the death penalty for Jason Massey on October 12, 1994. After the verdict was announced, the judge stated that executing Jason was a more humane option than what he had done to his victims. When Jason was taken to death row, he claimed that he had placed Christina's hands and head in a pillowcase along with her clothes and thrown them into the river. However, police were skeptical of his account, as he often kept trophies from his crimes. Jason was shocked by the conviction. He was determined to fight the verdict, so his lawyer filed an appeal on his behalf. Many advocates, including a Canadian coalition against the death penalty, spoke out in his support. Human rights advocates argued that the death penalty was inhumane and criticized the investigation, claiming that it was poorly conducted and ignored other potential suspects who were in the car during the kidnapping of Christina and Brian. Despite their efforts, their actions were ultimately in vain. On the evening of April 3, 2001, Jason was led to the execution chamber. For his last meal, he chose chicken legs, fried pumpkin, fried eggplant, mashed potatoes, green peas, boiled cabbage, corn, spinach with cheese, caramel fudge, pecans, ice cream, and a pot of sweet tea. Before his execution, Jason spoke to the victims' families, expressing his remorse for his actions. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Solomon family. Angela grew up in a religious family in Nashville, USA. She was talented in singing and excelled academically. Then, she earned a doctorate in pharmacy and was successful in her career, which allowed her to earn a good income. She bought a house and lived a fulfilling life. In 2001, she reconnected with Aaron Solomon, a charismatic guy she had known since school. He was a sports presenter on a TV channel and made a good impression on her. The couple started dating, and just a few months later, Angela became pregnant with a son. In 2002, their first child was born, named Grant. Immediately after that, Aaron proposed to Angela, but their relationship was complicated, and she was unsure about marriage. She initially planned to raise the child on her own. However, her religious family pressured her to marry, and she eventually agreed. Aaron turned out to be a caring father and loving husband. And their relationship improved. For years after their wedding, in October 2006, they welcomed a daughter named Gracie. Grant, who was 4 years old at the time, was thrilled to have a younger sister. He stayed by her crib and helped his mother with her care. Then, he began playing baseball and became a successful player on his school team, gaining popularity among his peers. After the birth of Gracie, the parents' relationship worsened. Aaron was a controlling and possessive man who insulted his wife and children while having multiple affairs. He used his status as a presenter to start many affairs. In 2013, 7 years old, Gracie told her mother that her father was bothering her during bath time. It was discovered that Aaron had prohibited his wife from bathing their daughter, insisting on doing it himself, and even filmed his daughter without clothes. Angela forbade Aaron from bathing or touching their daughter. Although he admitted to his actions, he threatened Angela, warning that he would take their children away if Angela told anyone. As an active church member, he demanded complete obedience from his family, so Angela felt compelled to remain silent. Angela finds out that Aaron has cheated on many other girls and learned he was molesting minors. In 2014, explicit photos of minors were found on his phone, but the incident was covered up and he lost his job. However, Then he found a new job as a financial consultant at a large bank. The couple began to argue more often. Angela wanted a divorce, but Aaron refused and suggested they see a family psychologist. Angela agreed, and during therapy, it was revealed that she had been dealing with victim syndrome throughout her life. Her parents had been harsh, imposing their religious beliefs on her, and she had entered an unfortunate marriage with Aaron, who was narcissistic and struggled with sexual addiction. The sessions didn't help with their family problems. Angela found another psychologist she trusted and shared all the details of her life and family issues. She started considering a plan to leave Aaron, who was controlling and wouldn't let her go. She kept notes on her phone and communicated with the psychologist via email. However, Aaron was secretly listening to her therapy sessions, checking her phone and email, and was aware of all her plans. She complained to her parents about Aaron's troubling behavior, but they didn't support her. They sided with he, believing, due to their faith, that a woman should endure her husband's behavior and keep the household intact. She felt unsupported by everyone. Aaron's behavior deteriorated, and he started to become violent towards his wife and children. The children, wanting to protect their mother, they began sleeping in the same room out of fear of their father. One day, Aaron attacked Angela in the bathroom, attempting to strangle her with a hairdryer cord. She was ready to say goodbye to life when her 11-year-old son, Grant, intervened and managed to stop his father. Terrified, she and the children chose not to tell anyone about the incident and did not report Aaron to the police. However, he called 911, falsely claiming that she had tried to end your life using the cord. She was then hospitalized for psychiatric evaluation, despite asserting that she was mentally sound. Eventually, doctors reassured her that she was indeed healthy. Angela's psychotherapist learned about her situation and shared their correspondence, explaining that Angela was a victim of domestic violence. Angela was discharged from the hospital on May 11, 2013, and was advised to obtain a restraining order against her husband. Medical records confirmed she was not depressed, had no end-your-life thoughts, no history of mental health issues. However, she was indeed a victim of domestic violence and was in a dangerous situation. After her release, Angela was determined to secure a restraining order against her husband and file for divorce. Upon returning home, she found the house empty. She attempted to contact Aaron, but he did not respond. She also tried calling her own parents and his parents, but received no answer. Her relatives dismissed her as mentally ill and ignored her. The next day, May 12, was Mother's Day. Angela hoped Aaron would bring the children to visit her, but instead, the police arrived at her house. He had falsely reported to 911 that she was attempting to end your life. The police checked on her, but they found no cause for concern and left. Time passed, and Angela received a restraining order but still did not know where the children were. She contacted the police several times, asking them to locate the children, but they refused to take her statement because the children were with their father, Darren, who had the legal right to have them. He had not kidnapped them. She soon discovered that he had filed for divorce first and had obtained a restraining order against her. He claimed she was a danger to him and the children. Divorce proceedings began, and both his parents and her parents spoke against her. As a result, he was granted full custody of the children, and the court ordered she to pay child support. The children were not present in court and were not asked with whom they wanted to stay. The judge noted that she had been in a mental hospital, which was enough to deny her custody claims. She couldn't do anything about her children. Angela continued to live with her father and fought hard to challenge the guardianship, arguing that the children were not well with Aaron. A retrial for the guardianship case was scheduled. He hired top lawyers for the case, having recently received a large inheritance from a wealthy aunt who had passed away. During the trial, Angela's relatives once again testified against her, alleging she was intent to end her life. However, this time, psychotherapists and staff from the psychiatric hospital defended her. They confidently stated that she was a victim of Aaron's abusive behavior and had never attempted to end her life. Her injuries were inflicted by her husband. Despite this, the judge ignored their testimony and awarded full custody to Aaron. Angela did not give up and repeatedly challenged the custody decision, eventually securing the right to see her children for 2 hours a week. When she finally saw them, she was shocked by their condition. Both Grant and Gracie had lost weight, and Gracie had severe bruises under her eyes. Aaron disciplined them harshly, using physical violence, enforcing a strict diet, and banning unhealthy and sweet foods. Grant once jumped out of a moving car to escape from his father and was injured. The children were told by their father that their mother, Angela, was dead when she was actually placed in a mental hospital. He also said it was unsafe there, so they needed to move. The children believed their father at the time because they saw their mother in a bad state after being strangled and felt hopeless, thinking no one could help them. Angela fought to gain full custody of the children, which required her to undergo a psychiatric examination to prove her mental health. She passed the examination successfully. In 2014, the court increased Angela's child visitation rights to 6 hours per week, but kept the children with their father. She continued her legal battle. In early 2015, Angela received devastating news. Aaron had been raping 9-year-old Gracie for several months. The frightened girl felt she couldn't tell anyone. She described feeling sleepy and falling asleep after eating. Then she wake up in her father's bed with severe pain in her crotch and bruises on her thighs. She didn't know how the bruises got there. Her father, Aaron, claimed it was a rash from her bathing suit, but she knew that wasn't true. He never took them to the doctor, fearing exposure, even when they were very sick. Gracie recounted how Aaron beat them, drove recklessly to scare them, and neglected their basic needs. Angela was horrified by this information and tried to use it to gain custody of the children from Aaron, their abusive father, awaiting a new trial. In April 2015, Aaron filed a complaint against Angela for not paying child support, leading to her arrest. She argued that Aaron was not properly caring for the children and was using the child support money for himself and his lovers, despite having inherited wealth. Angela was later released and continued to pay child support. She fought for her children for several more years, reporting Aaron to law enforcement, contacting his church, and warning the church school about the danger he posed. However, no one took her seriously, and everyone thought she was crazy. In 2018, Grant and Gracie ran away from home. Aaron immediately contacted the police, and the children were found quickly. When they returned, Aaron punished them harshly. Angela, upon discovering this, requested an emergency custody hearing due to Aaron's abusive behavior. On August 17, 2018, during Grant's baseball tournament, Aaron and Gracie came to watch the match. After the match, Aaron took Gracie with him, while Grant stayed at the sports camp. Aaron rented a hotel room with only one bed for the night. Despite 12-year-old Gracie's request for a room with 2 beds, Aaron raped her that night. The following day, on August 18, an emergency custody hearing took place. Gracie disclosed what her father had done, but Aaron's lawyer denied the allegations, suggesting that Gracie imagined the incident and arguing that Aaron, being a loving father, couldn't have committed such an act. Later, Grant testified that his father was abusive, beat him, fed him poorly, humiliated him, and forced him to train all day. Both children expressed their desire to live with their mother, not their father. However, the judge did not believe them. He concluded that Angela and the children were lying to damage Aaron's reputation because Aaron attended the same Grace Church as the judge and a senator, where he was well regarded. This was a closed, deeply religious community. Aaron attended church every Sunday, never missing an event, and was well regarded by the community's elite. People couldn't believe that Aaron was capable of such monstrous behavior. And there is no evidence that he abused the children. The judge dismissed Angela's request for custody. During the trial, Gracie clung to her mother and was reluctant to leave with her father. However, when her father threatened to call the police, she had no choice but to go with him. The mother lost custody rights, but the children were unable to stay with their father either. Gracie and Grant sought help from school staff, a psychologist, and the church, sharing the terrible things their father had done to them. However, the principal called them in and urged them to remain silent to protect both their and their father's reputations. Despite their efforts to explain why they didn't want to return home, the principal dismissed their claims, saying he had heard it all before and didn't believe them. He contacted their father, who then removed them from school. Nobody believed the children, as everyone thought Angela had coerced them into falsely accusing their father. One day, Gracie and Grant couldn't take it anymore and ran to their mother, Angela. Then, Aaron came to look for them and asked them to return. Grant and Gracie refused, and he allowed them to live temporarily with their mother. With the help of therapy, they set boundaries, and their father began to respect them. Grant and Gracie sometimes had to live with their father, as he still had more custody rights, but most of the time they lived with their mother. During those times, they were happy, and the relationship with their father became more tense and reached its peak. On July 20th, 2020, 18-year-old Grant was driving to his training, which was about an hour away from Angela's house. Upon arriving at the parking lot, a tragic accident occurred in which Grant lost his life. His father, Aaron, who was also at the training, witnessed the incident. He immediately called 911 for help for his son. Aaron later recounted the event. Aaron explained that he had exited his pickup truck to retrieve his gear from the back. While standing in the parking lot near the building, he was focused on his phone and did not notice the pickup rolling backwards. The vehicle hit him, dragging him several meters before it went down a deep ditch. Aaron, who was there with 3 others, saw everything unfold. When the police arrived, they found Grant lying on his back beneath the front of a car, but the tires were not touching him. Blood was streaming from his nose and ears. Using a jack, they managed to lift the car and pulled him out. He was still breathing, so they performed CPR and rushed him to the hospital. Unfortunately, despite their efforts, Grant, who was in serious condition, died on the way without regaining consciousness. Although he had multiple injuries, but the official cause of death was cardiac arrest. Strangely, Aaron accompanied him to the hospital and signed papers preventing an autopsy and organ donation. When Angela learned about the incident, she hurried to the hospital and requested an autopsy, but her pleas were ignored. The police classified the case as an accident and didn't pursue further investigation. Angela believed Aaron's account of the incident was false, pointing to various inconsistencies. Grant's injuries didn't match those of someone trapped under a car. He had no typical crushing injuries. The hospital recorded just 1 head injury and 3 bruises, on his jaw, left hip, and right hip. Aaron claimed Grant drove a pickup for about an hour to reach his training, yet there were no burn marks from a hot car, nor were there abrasions from being dragged on asphalt. At the scene of the tragedy, there was no blood, and Grant's shoes were completely clean, which contradicted Aaron's story. The grass near the car's exit and the path where the body was dragged were untouched. There weren't even tire tracks where they should have been. Instead, they were found on the other side of the sidewalk. Grant's glasses were discovered there too. He always wore his glasses because he had poor vision without them, shown in all his photos. So, how did his glasses end up on the sidewalk if he wasn't there? He was in the parking lot. Why didn't his glasses fall there when the car allegedly ran over him? According to Aaron, Grant had his back to the car and didn't see it coming when it moved in reverse. Strangely, Grant was found lying on his back under the car but in the opposite direction. How could his body have turned 180 degrees under the car? It seems impossible. Furthermore, how could the car back into the ditch and then get back up and out of the ditch? It was hard to believe. None of the people in the nearby buildings heard Grant's screams, which should have been heard during such an accident. Everything happened quietly, so no one saw or heard anything. There were no CCTV cameras, and the three guys Aaron mentioned on the call were not there either. Strangely, Aaron did not attempt to rescue his son from the car, even though Aaron was briefly with him. Aaron just watched as his son died. Grant never stored equipment in the back of the car, he always left his uniform on the back seat. The phone Aaron claimed Grant was using was never found. Although Grant always carried his phone with him and called his girlfriend every morning, he didn't call that day for some reason. There was no damage to the car. Even though the rear bumper of this car model is fragile and prone to breaking, it was intact. It would have been damaged in such a descent. There were no witnesses to this tragic accident. A man saw Aaron walking along the road shortly before the tragedy, in the parking lot. It's unclear what he was doing there, although Aaron claimed he arrived later. At his son's funeral, Aaron described his death as a divine act, leaving everyone surprised. People were shocked by Aaron's lack of emotion, he showed no grief for his son. Angela suspected that he may have hit their son with his car elsewhere and staged the accident by bringing their son to the location afterwards. There was confusion as to why the pickup truck unexpectedly rolled away, as it had been parked correctly and had no previous issues. It was speculated that the truck might have had a technical fault, and although Aaron initially suggested investigating it to sue the manufacturer for compensation, he eventually declined, which was out of character for him since he usually pursued financial gains. He continued to drive the truck without any concern for several months. Angela wanted to investigate the truck herself, but Aaron strongly opposed the idea and promptly sent the vehicle to the scrapyard. This was puzzling, as the truck was in excellent condition and could have been sold for a good price. Angela managed to locate the vehicle in spring 2021 and arranged for an independent examination. Experts concluded that the accident could not have occurred as Aaron had claimed. Angela then pushed for the investigation of the case, which had been closed, to be reopened. Grant had just turned 18, according to Angela, and he had always protected Gracie's from their abusive father. He warned his father that as soon as he turned 18, he would go to court. He and his sister Gracie planned to formally free themselves from their father's control, believing the court would take them more seriously as adults. In Angela's opinion, Aaron feared this and decided to stop his son. Gracie was devastated by the loss of her beloved brother, who could protect her. On May 12, 2021, Gracie, then 14, uploaded an 18-minute video on YouTube in which she described her father, Aaron, as a monster. She claimed that he attempted to kill their mother, raped her, and physically abused both her and Grant, eventually killing Grant's. Gracie fears that her father might harm her now that her brother is gone. They are defenseless, and their father started harassing them. Despite a restraining order, Aaron continued to stalk she and begged her to return home, but she refused. She was granted legal protection, but her father ignored it and kept following her from school. Due to the school principal's friendship with he from church, they refused to enforce the restraining order. After this interview, Aaron once again complained that Gracie was being negatively influenced and turned against him. He persuaded she that she imagined everything and that her mother had suggested the idea of rape. Aaron filed a defamation lawsuit against Angela, gathering people who refuted the information in the video Gracie recorded. He claimed Angela demanded he give up custody and threatened him. Angela was determined to seek justice. At the trial, Aaron withdrew the lawsuit but is considering refiling with a new legal team. Angela and her daughter Gracie are striving for justice for Grant. Gracie prefers to live with her mother and not see her father. They launched a website and gathered support from many people after Grant's death. However, the pastor, the school principal, and other individuals denied any involvement. One of Grant's classmates mentioned that she, along with Gracie, asked the school administration to intervene and protect them from Aaron, but the school dismissed their request, saying it was beyond their responsibility. In Tennessee, there is a law requiring anyone who suspects child abuse to report it to the Department of Children. However, no one reported anything in this case. After Grant's death, students were not allowed to discuss the tragedy at school. Later, the pastor left the church, causing a significant split within the congregation. Currently, Aaron has not been charged with any crimes related to Grant, and he denies all accusations against him. Aaron's supporters occasionally post on social media, accusing Gracie and Angela of lying and behaving unchristianly. Angela and Gracie live together but are afraid of Aaron. Gracie aspires to become an FBI agent to help people through investigations. The tragic story of the Solomon family leaves behind many painful and unforgettable lessons about domestic abuse and violence, as well as society's indifference to victims. Through this story, we clearly see the need to protect children and vulnerable family members from abusive acts. At the same time, the importance of support from the community and authorities is also emphasized. Let's speak up together and protect the vulnerable so that no family has to endure such pain again. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Deanna Laney. Deanna Laney was known for being quiet, uncommunicative, and calm. She lived in a small town with a population of just 600. She was deeply religious and a member of the Pentecostal church, where her relative was the pastor, and she participated in the choir. People who knew Deanna were shocked by her actions, as no one suspected she might have mental health issues. She always appeared to be a loving, exemplary mother and wife. However, outside of the church, the family lived quite isolated from society. They had no close neighbors, and their home was situated on a large plot of land, distant from other houses. They chose to raise their children in the countryside, homeschooling them instead of sending them to public schools. Deanna, a housewife, is responsible for her children's education. This isolation likely contributed to others not noticing any problems with the seemingly loving mother. Their family lived in isolation from the outside world, to the point that only a small group of family members knew the details of Deanna's mental health problems. On the evening before Mother's Day, May 10, 2003, a 911 call was made from Northeast Texas. A calm female voice clearly told the dispatcher that she had killed her children. The dispatcher kept talking to the caller and guided her to the emergency service location. When police officers arrived at the small house in Chapel Hill, they identified it as the home of Deanna and Dale Laney. Inside, they found Deanna in pajamas, seemingly just woken up, looking confused as the police continued their investigation. Officers continued to search the area and eventually found the woman who had called 911. She was nearby in a small grove, wandering barefoot, in white pajamas covered in blood, still talking to the emergency dispatcher. It was 39 years old Deanna Laney. She calmly informed the police that her son's bodies were behind the swings in the yard. The officers went to the spot she described and discovered the bodies of 6-year-old Luke and 8-year-old Joshua. Both boys were lying on the ground in their underwear, their heads so severely mutilated that they were unrecognizable. The children had suffered fatal head injuries. Experienced detectives said this was one of the most horrific crime scenes they had ever encountered. However, there were only 2 bodies. Officers were told by Dale that they had 3 children. Despite this, they continued searching for the youngest child. They entered the house and checked the children's room, where they discovered 1-year-old Aaron. He was still alive but severely injured, covered in blood, and a pillow was over his face. Aaron was immediately taken to the nearest children's hospital and then moved to the Dallas Medical Center for treatment of the terrible injuries caused by his mother, Deanna. Deanna was arrested, but she was unable to give a statement due to mental health issues. She claimed that God commanded her to kill her sons. She used stones to attack the heads of the two children, Joshua and Luke. Although the youngest child, Aaron, was seriously hurt, but the boy survived the incident. Investigators questioned Dale, suspecting that he might have heard or seen something, as the children were likely to scream during the attack. However, he was bewildered and didn't understand how his wife could commit such acts. He mentioned waking up that night to the cries of Aaron, which was unusual since the child typically slept soundly. He went to the nursery and found his wife standing over the crib in the dark. She reassured him that everything was all right and that she was just soothing the baby. Trusting her, he went back to bed and slept throughout the incident. He only realized the true nature of his wife's actions when it was too late. Police were unable to learn of any problems Deanna was experiencing from Dale or her relatives. It was later discovered that she was hallucinating, which made her intend to kill her child, supposedly under God's influence. Among all the friends and family interviewed, only her sister, Pam, noticed changes in her behavior. Recently, Pam informed investigators that she started acting differently. During this time, she barely ate and lost noticeable weight. She spent all her free time reading the Bible and occasionally said strange things. However, Pam didn't think much of it. After discussing Deanna's behavior with Dale, she dismissed her concerns and felt reassured. The police observed Deanna's erratic behavior while she was in custody. Her condition visibly changed before their eyes. She would sometimes collapse to the floor in a fetal position and crying. Then she might stand up and start singing church hymns. At times, she seemed to realize what she had done, resulting in a vacant stare. It was clear that she was at a high risk of ending her own life, so the police followed protocol. Deanna was placed under special supervision to prevent self-harm. This was necessary to conduct a psychiatric evaluation, which later took place in a psychiatric clinic. The doctors questioned Deanna, and she smiled as she recounted her actions toward her sons. She laughed sincerely, believing she had fulfilled God's will. She was convinced her children would be resurrected, but she felt the youngest, Aaron, should have died too. She regretted that this did not happen, as she believed it meant she had failed to fully comply with God's demands. As punishment for her actions, she drank water from the toilet and licked it off the floor during her hospital stay. Deanna explained that she had resisted God's will for a long time. She did not want to kill her children, which she thought angered him. He increasingly insisted that she fulfill what was predestined. The longer she resisted, the more severe the punishments he demanded. Ultimately, she felt she had to surrender and follow his will. Deanna compared her actions to those of Andrea, who killed her two children 2 years earlier under similar religious delusions. According to Deanna, after the end of the world, Joshua and Luke would serve as witnesses at the Last Judgment, which is why she ended her own life. Deanna confided to doctors that she felt fighting those voices was a selfish act to save her child, even though it meant she was disobeying God. Ultimately, she believed she made correct decision by submitting to the Lord's will. Deanna recounted that on the night of May 9th, she was awakened by what she believed to be a message from God, telling her that the time had come. She quietly got out of bed to avoid waking her husband. First, she went to Aaron's room, where she had previously hidden a large stone intended for a ritual act. She used the stone to strike the baby on the head several times. The baby cried out, so she placed a pillow over his face to silence him. Her husband, Dale, half asleep, entered the room. She reassured him that everything was fine, so he left and went back to sleep. He was unaware of the situation and missed the chance to save his children. Deanna kept the pillow on Aaron's face until she heard a gurgling sound and then stopped. Next, Deanna woke her two older sons, Joshua and Luke, and took them to the backyard garden. She led Luke aside, instructed little boy to dig in the ground, and then began hitting him on the head with a large stone. She struck him at least 8 times, crushing his skull. Afterward, she dragged his body behind the swing and placed a large stone on his chest, believing this would prevent him from breathing. She then spoke to God, saying this was all she could do for her son. Then, lightning struck, which she interpreted as a sign that Luke had died. Afterward, Deanna went back to the garden and began hitting Joshua. However, he was bigger and stronger, so and resisted his mother more. She then pinned his arms down and struck his head with a stone until he stopped moving. After this, she dragged his body behind the swing. Immediately after the act, she called 911 and confessed to the horrific crime. Aaron also suffered severely. Though the baby survived, the injuries were so serious that he was left disabled. The child lost his sight and independence, needing a wheelchair for the rest of his life due to his mother's abuse. The case of Deanna had many similarities to Andreas. Both women lived in Texas and homeschooled their children. They were deeply religious and believed their actions were for religious purposes. Both felt that they had no other option but to harm their children. They each called 911 afterward, and both were evaluated by the same psychiatrists before their trials. Deanna was aware of Andrea's case and often compared herself to her, but Deanna's trial unfolded very differently. Deanna appeared in court in late March 2004. The prosecution sought to punish her for 2 first-degree murders and aggravated assault on Aaron, requesting the death penalty, which is applicable in Texas. Alternatively, she faced 3 life sentences for her crimes. The defense lawyers argued that she was innocent due to insanity. They claimed that insanity was the only reason a religious mother, who loved and homeschooled her children, would kill 2 of them and harm another without showing any emotion. In Texas, at the time of the murder, the state had some of the strictest laws in the United States regarding the handling of murderers. Defendants had to prove they had a mental disorder during the crime and convince the court they couldn't distinguish right from wrong. 5 psychiatrists formed a team to evaluate Deanna's. The examination lasted 6 days, during which she cried almost continuously. She refused to look at photographs of her mutilated children and the crime scene. Some psychiatrists believed she was sane when she killed her sons, while others thought she couldn't distinguish good from evil due to religious hallucinations. Deanna shared with doctors several details that even those close to the Laney family, including household members and relatives, did not know. The doctors concluded that signs of mental disturbances began appearing more than 3 years ago. An early indication, similar to hallucinations, was Deanna smelling sulfur, which she believed came from her children and perceived as a demonic sign. Deanna also reported seeing Aaron playing with a spear. She claimed that God had shown her 3 methods for her to kill her son, using a spear or a knife, a stone, and strangulation. While doing chores in the garden before the massacre, Deanna tripped over a stone. She realized that the stone would become the main weapon she would use to sacrifice her sons. She didn't tell anyone about this, but openly claimed that the Lord had spoken to her. She shared this in church, warning parishioners about the impending end of the world. However, the congregation largely ignored her, as such statements were common in their religious tradition, which not everyone followed. During her initial psychiatric evaluation, Deanna showed no emotion and genuinely believed her children would be resurrected. After taking antipsychotic medication, she eventually understood her actions differently and felt remorse. Deanna was horrified to realize she had been suffering from hallucinations that drove her actions. During a psychiatric examination, it was determined that Deanna was insane when she committed the murders of her 2 sons, Joshua and Luke. The examiners concluded that she suffered from psychotic delusions that prevented her from distinguishing right from wrong at the time of the murder. However, the prosecutor disagreed with the diagnosis that Deanna was insane when she committed the murders. He argued that even if she believed she was doing God's will, she should have known that her actions were wrong according to state law. The prosecutor pointed out that her first action after the murder was to call 911, which indicated that she was aware of the wrongness of her actions. Additionally, when Dale entered the room, she attempted to hide what had happened, further suggesting that she knew her actions were wrong. The prosecution also stressed that when Deanna was unable to complete killing Aaron, she told God that he just needed to do the rest. This statement demonstrated to the prosecutor that she was aware of right and wrong. The prosecutor believed that her actions were intentional and planned, which is not consistent with the behavior of someone who is insane. Prison guards testified at the trial, describing Deanna's behavior in prison as unusually compliant. They rarely saw such conduct and believed she had serious mental health issues. The 911 call recording was part of the evidence the jurors considered. Her voice on the call was eerily calm. Jurors also requested a psychiatric report to understand why she stopped attacking Aaron, who was 14 months old at the time. However, they reached a verdict before receiving the report. Deanna sat near the portrait of her 3 children and cried loudly as the prosecutor recounted the horrifying incident of how she used a rock to hit her children. Her sons, Joshua and Luke, were struck on the head so severely that their brains were exposed, leaving their heads in a bloody state. Deanna's husband, Dale Laney, 47, attended the trial and was devastated by the loss of his 2 sons. He couldn't comprehend how this tragedy occurred and believed it was appropriate to commit Deanna to lifelong treatment in a clinic. In the end, Deanna was declared innocent due to insanity and had to be treated for mental illness at the hospital. Doctors expected her to need lifelong treatment and doubted her recovery. Dale divorced Deanna after she was admitted to the psychiatric clinic in 2008. He eventually remarried and started a new family. He continues to care for his disabled son, Aaron. Deanna was closely monitored by psychiatrists for 8 years. In 2012, doctors determined that she no longer needed to stay in the hospital because she was healthy and did not pose a threat to herself or others. She was released on a number of conditions. She was to have no contact with minors. She needs court permission if she wants to change her address. Had to allow social workers to visit her at any time, and had to continue taking her prescribed medications and undergo drug and substance testing. Only a few people, including her lawyers, know where Deanna lives now. Her ex-husband, Dale, felt very angry when he learned that she was released from the psychiatric clinic. Many people in society also agree with Dale. They believe the killer of 2 sons should be imprisoned or face the death penalty. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Gabrielle Uchlaki. Friendship during youth is very important. However, finding a true friend for life can be challenging. Sometimes, people may appear friendly but have hidden selfish motives or even darker intentions. It's not always easy to recognize these signs, and failing to do so can lead to serious consequences. Gabrielle lives in a cozy little town in Nevada, USA. The local economy relies heavily on the mining industry, which provides jobs and supports families. Gabrielle's family moved here from Colorado Springs. Her father Jim had planned to find work in the gold mines. The family was excited about their new life, believing that the town was perfect for them and everything seemed to be going well. Gabrielle was immediately drawn to this vibrant atmosphere. She loved the beautiful natural surroundings, horseback riding and ATV riding, while some consider these activities more suited to boys. This added to Gabrielle's appeal as an active and adventurous young woman. Gabrielle has a close bond with her brother James, who is only a year older than her. They spend a lot of time playing game. Their family, united and loving, always supports each other through difficult times. Even when their parents decided to divorce, they handled the situation calmly to protect their children from emotional distress. After the divorce, both parents maintained a friendly relationship and resolved issues related to property division in child custody without conflict. After the divorce, her mother, Alicia, moved away but chose to live nearby so they could co-parent. Both parents took turns caring for Gabrielle and James and maintained open communication, which helped ease the emotional impact of the divorce on the children. This approach allowed Gabrielle to grow into a strong and intelligent young woman. She became very independent and faced challenges without fear. From a young age, Gabrielle helped her parents with housework. By the age of 16, Gabrielle was skilled at horseback riding, herding cattle, and helping on the farm, and was admired by her family and neighbors for her diligence and professionalism. She was cheerful and easy to get along with. After finishing school, Gabrielle plans to attend college to study psychiatry and help people struggling with mental disorders. Gabrielle has always been empathetic to the pain of others, which is what led her to pursue this career path. However, in 2020, Gabrielle faced bullying at school. Her best friend noted that many of her classmates suddenly turned against her that year for no apparent reason. This friend suspected that envy and jealousy were the main causes, as many girls were jealous of Gabrielle's beauty and intelligence and targeted her for bullying. Eventually, Gabrielle had to switch schools, but she remained optimistic. She had a small group of close friends who truly loved and supported her. Gabrielle started to spend more time on horse racing, where she met others who shared her interests. One of them was Bryce Dickey, who was a couple of years older than her. They quickly became friends, and Gabrielle often referred to him as an older brother. However, it seemed that Bryce wanted something more than friendship. He spent a lot of time with her, and she got along well with his family. Bryce was known to be a kind and polite young man who, like Gabrielle, was always willing to help those in need. Gabrielle and Bryce became close friends because of their similar personalities. They made plans to meet up, as they often did. That day, Gabrielle was at her father's house, where he was practicing with his rock band. She was eager to spend time with her father. She was chatting happily with the band members and even invited Bryce to watch. Unfortunately, Bryce missed practice. Bryce then plans to pick Gabrielle up by car to his house to watch a movie and promises to drop her off later. When her father Jim got home around 7:30 p.m., he discovered that Gabrielle was not home. He searched the house, calling her name, but received no response. Worried, Jim tried calling her, but her phone was turned off. This was unusual, as Gabrielle was usually responsible. She was never late, and it seemed unlikely that she would forget to come home on time. The worried father called Gabrielle's brother James, but he also had no idea where she was. Jim then called Bryce to ask about his daughter. Bryce told Jim that after driving around the city for a few hours, Bryce dropped Gabrielle off near the school, where she met a guy he didn't recognize. Bryce then left to avoid interrupting their conversation. Jim asked Bryce again why they didn't go to the movie as planned. Bryce explained that he and Gabrielle had simply changed plans and decided to drive along country roads. Naturally, Jim was anxious to know who Gabrielle had met, but Bryce couldn't provide any details. He described the man as a tall, blonde young man with the appearance of a cowboy. Jim was surprised by Bryce's words. He didn't understand who this stranger was or why Bryce would leave Gabrielle with a stranger instead of taking her home as planned. Bryce had always made sure to take care of Gabrielle, so this behavior seemed unusual. Bryce was very worried about what had happened. He felt guilty for not taking Gabrielle home, explaining that she had asked him to leave. Bryce now realized that the situation could be serious and that something might have happened to her. He remembered that the stranger was driving an old RD F-150 pickup truck. This only added to the family's worries, as none of her friends owned such a vehicle. Gabrielle's family tried calling her hundreds of times, but each call went straight to voicemail. Concerned, her parents decided to contact the police. However, as usual, the police assumed that Gabrielle had probably just run away or gone out with friends and would return soon. However, her parents knew that this was not normal for Gabrielle. She had very few friends and none of them knew where she was. Gabrielle had no family problems, addictions, or mental health concerns, and there had been no recent conflicts. To her family, her sudden disappearance was a clear indication that something serious had happened. The sheriff realized the seriousness of the situation. He gathered all the information available from Gabrielle's friends and acquaintances. The police then contacted Bryce to request a meeting near the school where Gabrielle had gone missing, to provide details about what happened after he dropped her off. Bryce said that he had spent the day with Gabrielle and that they had been driving around the Spring Creek area in his car. However, during their outing, his father called unexpectedly and asked him to come home immediately to help with some errands. Understanding the situation, Gabrielle agreed to reschedule their trip for the next day, but she asked to be dropped off near the school. She also mentioned that she wanted to meet her new friend, Jetty. Bryce reported that after Gabrielle exited his car, she walked directly towards a green pickup truck where a white man in a cowboy hat was sitting. He observed her but then drove off, unsure if she entered a stranger's vehicle. The Bryce had a poor recollection of the details and did not note the pickup truck's license plate. During the conversation, the police found no reason to suspect Bryce. He seemed innocent, so they decided to release him and continue investigating other clues. The police wanted to draw public attention to the case using the media, believing that someone might have seen the man in the cowboy hat and driving the green pickup truck. Initially, the police focused on identifying the license plate number. Additionally, the sheriff contacted the phone service provider to determine the last known location of Gabrielle's cell phone. They discovered that her phone had been active near the school where Bryce had dropped her off. As a result, the police rushed to that location in hopes of finding new evidence, but they found nothing suspicious there. Gabrielle's family and friends continued to search the streets, hoping to find any clues to her whereabouts in the city and surrounding areas. They distributed and posted more than 500 flyers, but local residents remained unresponsive and there were no new leads for the investigation. It felt as if Gabrielle had disappeared without a trace. Meanwhile, Gabrielle's mother Alicia created a social media group to share updates and information about the search, but the effort yielded no results. Then, out of the blue, she received a text message from an unknown number. The sender claimed to have kidnapped Gabrielle and demanded a $25 ransom, threatening to harm her if Alicia did not pay. After some time, the kidnappers sent another text message, saying that Gabrielle was sick and would die without the medicine. The kidnapper insisted that he would only provide the medicine if he received the money he demanded. Initially, the parents agreed to the kidnappers' demands, but they decided to contact the police first. Alicia called the police to report the situation. They quickly asked her to come to the station so they could trace the phone number. It seemed that the investigation had turned up an important lead. While police were trying to track down the phone number used by the kidnapper, one of the search team leaders contacted the police. He informed them that volunteers were searching about 20 kilometers from the city when they discovered a puddle of what appeared to be dried blood on the side of the road. The search team got out of their vehicles and began searching the area, where they eventually discovered a blue tarp in the bushes. Underneath, they found the body of a girl lying face down, her clothes matching Gabrielle's description. One of the police officers entered the office and announced that the interview with Alicia would have to be postponed because they had to go to the scene where the body was discovered. Alicia began to cry, and upon arriving at the scene she identified Gabrielle. Forensic experts determined that Gabrielle had been raped, as her pants and underwear were pulled down to her ankles. She had been strangled and her throat had been slit. Which was the cause of death? Police found Gabrielle's headphones tangled in a nearby tree branch. They also found a used condom and its packaging near her body. This provided a clue to the investigation. Police wanted to learn more about Jetty, Gabrielle's new acquaintance, but no one could provide specific details about him. Finding this individual became a top priority. Gabrielle's family received significant support from social networks, with Bryce being particularly notable. He maintained close contact with Gabrielle's mother, father, and brother, offering help and expressing his sorrow. He described Gabrielle as a bright person and a close friend he would never forget. Meanwhile, the police began their investigation by obtaining warrants to search the Gabrielle's computer and mobile phone. They also needed to analyze the evidence they had collected, including DNA found on a condom, which was crucial for solving the case. It was suspected that Gabrielle might have been targeted by an internet predator with a history of sexual violence. The police quickly created and reviewed a list of registered sex offenders in the area who might have been connected to the incident. To identify the criminal, all the information needed to be compared. However, this process took a long time, causing the investigation to drag on. Meanwhile, the police quickly checked the information from the kidnapper. They were able to trace the phone number that called the Alicia to demand a ransom. Unfortunately, this number was not registered in Nevada. It was a hidden number bought online, making it impossible to track. The police first wanted to identify Jetty, who was considered the prime suspect in the case. After obtaining information from Gabrielle's phone, the police quickly located him. However, they were disappointed to discover that Jetty was in Alaska at the time of Gabrielle's death. Although they had met shortly before the incident and had planned to meet again, he was not the one who raped and murdered her. He had an alibi. He had not left Alaska during that time. The police decided to investigate all other people with similar initials, driving similar cars, and living in the city, surrounding areas, and near where the body was found. They were only able to identify two young men driving a green pickup truck, but both had alibis, as they were far away at the time of the murder. This stalled the investigation. The police then contacted Gabrielle's family again, hoping to get new information. Alicia said that in the weeks before her death, Gabrielle had been dating a guy who was pursuing a cowboy lifestyle, living on a ranch and competing in rodeos. They quickly broke up because Gabrielle wasn't ready for intimacy. After the breakup, they remained friends, but during some nasty arguments, he made extreme comments about wanting her dead. After verifying his alibi, it seems the investigation has stalled once again. However, the police took one last approach to identifying the suspect. They decided to review all the city's surveillance camera footage, specifically looking for a green pickup truck driven by a cowboy. Fortunately, there were several high-quality cameras along the route Gabrielle took before her death and captured clear images. Police had to analyze multiple videos that had been recorded. Despite their efforts, they were unable to find the green pickup truck that Bryce had mentioned. However, police did find something interesting. The blue Chevy pickup that Bryce himself drove really was on the recording. He did not stop or let anyone out, which suggests that he lied about the green pickup truck. The police then decided to trace the route the blue pickup took. Bryce had previously claimed he had been driving around the area with his girlfriend for several hours, but this was proven false by the video evidence. The police decided to request data from Bryce's cell phone to compare his geographic location with that of the assault victim. They quickly obtained a warrant to access this data, and did not notify him to avoid alerting a new suspect. It was clear that he had been with Gabrielle all day because their movements matched until her cell phone turned off. Additionally, he was present at the location where Gabrielle's body was discovered before returning home. This indicated that Bryce was present at the crime scene and may have committed or witnessed the crime. To verify the assumption, an examination was conducted. The Bryce was immediately asked to undergo tests and provide DNA samples. He agreed. He was later released, but the police did not reveal their suspicions. Instead, they acted as if everything was normal and collected samples from everyone in the area. Skin particles were found under Gabrielle's fingernails, and these samples matched Bryce's DNA. It was clear that he had sex with Gabrielle, but everything happened involuntarily. Bryce was called in for questioning again. Bryce agreed to be questioned without hesitation, remaining calm and confident. The police asked him if he had ever had a relationship with Gabrielle, especially sexual. He denied these allegations, claiming that he considered her like a younger sister. Bryce's statements raised suspicion because if he was telling the truth, his DNA would not have been present at the crime scene. However, police discovered a condom containing his semen at the scene of the murder. Feeling that the police were onto something, Bryce changed his story, claiming that Gabrielle had flirted with him and that they had consensual oral sex while using a condom. Bryce later stuck to his story about a man in a green pickup truck, repeatedly claiming that he could not provide a clear description of the cowboy or the truck's license plate. However, multiple traces of Bryce's DNA were found under Gabrielle's fingernails, in her private parts, and even on her neck, near the fatal stab wound. Additionally, based on Bryce's movements and the surveillance camera footage, it was confirmed that he did not stop anywhere else. This indicated that he was lying. Under pressure from the police, Bryce eventually confessed that what happened to Gabrielle was an accident. He mentioned that she wanted to have rough sex with a knife, and in a moment of passion, the blade accidentally stabbed her. This explanation seems very unlikely, especially given his history of dishonesty. Bryce Dickey, 18, was arrested on March 19, 2020. Following his arrest, police searched his home and vehicle. At Bryce's home, police discovered several bloody items in his closet, including a knife that was determined to be the murder weapon. In the trunk of his car, they found a bloody sweatshirt with Gabrielle's blood on it, along with multiple fingerprints and DNA samples linking Bryce to the crime. When Gabrielle's family received the news, they were completely stunned. Her family had always considered Bryce a good young man, and he had treated them like family, considering him Gabrielle's best friend. The family had trusted Bryce as if he were their own, not knowing that he would betray them in such a terrible way. While the townspeople saw him as the true cowboy and a good person who would help others in times of need, he was actually hiding his true nature. Gabrielle's family trusted him. He made sure she got home safely and gave her regular rides, which seemed thoughtful. However, his intentions were not noble. He was actually trying to get close to his victim. In May 2022, the prosecution presented several credible testimonies, including testimony from Bryce's ex-girlfriend. She described him as aggressive and cruel, often getting into arguments. She recounted that he had choked her at least 4 times during their conflicts, with the last incident being so severe that she felt she was on the verge of death. She ended her relationship with Bryce, who had been stalking and threatening her for a long time. It was only when her parents threatened to call the police that he stopped. The jury then deliberated for about an hour and unanimously found Bryce Dickey guilty of first-degree murder and rape. The judge sentenced Bryce Dickey to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after serving 20 years. He received an additional 20 years for using a deadly weapon, another 20 years for kidnapping, and 10 more years for rape. In total, he will serve 70 years before he can seek release. Bryce did not explain his motive for the crime. However, a friend of Gabrielle's revealed that just days before the murder, Bryce confessed his love to her, but she suggested they remain friends. Police believed that Bryce could not handle the rejection and felt resentful. When he learned that Gabrielle was seeing a new boyfriend named Jetty, he became angry and sought revenge. Hello, crime enthusiasts, are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Terry McAdams. The main character in today's story is Terry McAdams, a vibrant and active 22-year-old from Arlington, Texas. Since her teenage years, she enjoyed driving around the neighborhoods in her convertible. She often spent time in the city with friends, listening to music. Terry was a bright and popular cheerleader who always drew attention but remained modest and well-mannered. She deeply loved her sisters, Hopper and Pamela, and shared a close bond with all her relatives. Terry acted as a mentor for her sisters, bridging the gap between them and their mother. She enjoyed dancing with them and even taught them how to drive. Everyone who knew Terry described her as a person who loved life. After graduating from high school, she enrolled in the University of Arkansas. Before completing her degree, she decided to move to Arlington to be with her fiancé, Karen Anderson, who was a few years older and had already graduated. After graduation, she planned to start a career and marry Karen, who proposed to her. Since 1984, local newspapers have been reporting on the murders in the Fort Worth area. During this time, Terry was studying at university and took the threat very seriously. She was genuinely afraid for her life, a concern she shared frequently with Karen and family. To protect herself, Terry made several significant changes. She quit her well-paying job in Irving, where she had to drive every day and return home in the dark. Understanding the potential danger, she decided it wasn't worth the risk of driving at night. Despite being young and energetic, Terry began to live a very cautious lifestyle. She stopped going out at night, avoided parties, and only left her home during the day when accompanied by Karen. She even felt anxious about going grocery shopping and often called her mother multiple times a day to express her fears. Terry was genuinely worried about the situation, especially since the authorities had not yet identified the criminal, leaving the streets of Arlington feeling unsafe. Around the same time, Texas police bodies formed a task force consisting of experienced experts to look into a series of violent crimes and prevent further massacres. They believed that a serial killer, or potentially multiple terrorists, were active in the area. Terry felt particularly anxious because she fit the profile of the victims. They were all attractive, around her age, and lived nearby. It was difficult for her to cope, but Karen provided strong support. She admitted to her mother and sisters that being alone was the most frightening part. To help her feel safer, Karen decided to leave his job and accept a new high-paying position closer to home, though it occasionally required business trips to nearby cities. During her moments of panic, she limited her outings and rushed home after school. For any important tasks, she aimed to handle them early in the morning and always sought someone to accompany her. On the morning of February 13, 1985, the local police station received a disturbing call. An employee responsible for technical maintenance at the residential complex where Terry lived reported that he was unable to gain access to the apartment. When the police arrived, no one answered the door, and they were unable to reach the Terry's relatives. As a result, they decided to speak with local residents. Neighbors confirmed the repairman's account. They also could not contact Terry but reported hearing suspicious noises coming from her apartment. The police then decided to break down the door to enter her apartment. Inside, they discovered a gruesome scene. Terry's body was found in the bedroom on the bed. Terry had been raped and brutally beaten with a blunt object. Based on the condition of her body and the blood evidence, it seemed the crime took place at night or early in the morning before the police were called. Forensic experts quickly arrived at the scene to begin their investigation. It was clear that there had been a struggle and Terry had fought back. They found numerous defensive wounds on her arms and upper body, and her face was severely disfigured from a prolonged beating. There were signs of strangulation on her neck, but the forensic expert believes the attacker did not kill her that way. Instead, she died from a severe head injury. She also suffered brutal rape, but it is unclear whether this occurred before or after her murder. DNA traces were found on her bed linen and underwear, but at that time, it was not possible to identify the owner. The analysis methods were still developing and could not be used in the investigation. Additionally, there were no surveillance cameras or geolocation tracking available. The situation became more complicated when local people learned about the tragedy and needed psychological support. The robbery theory was quickly dismissed as many valuables were still intact in the apartment, including conspicuous items. It was clear that robbery was not the motive. The police began interviewing Terry's friends and relatives, looking for people who might have had personal motives such as jealousy, hatred, or revenge. However, Terry McAdams was known to be very kind, friendly, and non-confrontational, and none of her relatives could think of anyone who would want to harm her. Police searched the crime scene but did not find the murder weapon, which forensic experts believe was a hammer or a similar metal tool. They did discover a cigarette butt in the apartment, indicating it likely belonged to the killer. Unfortunately, the technology available at the time was insufficient to extract DNA from the cigarette, and the saliva remnants were too small to analyze. The only useful information obtained was the brand of cigarettes the killer used. One theory being considered is that a serial killer may be responsible for the crimes. Police have looked into Terry's murder and other cases in the nearby area and believe the suspect may not have known the victims and the attacks appear to have occurred spontaneously. The attacker aimed to avoid detection and leave no evidence behind. So he chose to enter through the back sliding balcony door instead of the main entrance. There were no clear signs of a break-in on the outer window frame. It is probable that he used a tree, growing a few meters away from the apartment building's wall, to reach the balcony. Unfortunately, aside from these basic observations, police were unable to gather any useful information. Police spoke with the family of the Terry, particularly her mother and sisters, who had the closest bond with her. They were all understandably shocked by the tragedy. Terry, known for her cheerful demeanor, seemed incapable of having enemies, especially ones who would wish to harm her so cruelly. Disturbingly, it appeared that Terry had a sense of impending danger. She was afraid to leave her home, fearing she could become a victim. Tragically, she was killed in her own apartment. As news of the attack spread throughout the city, the local community began to believe that there was a killer on the loose, capable of breaking into any apartment. They suspected that he might have targeted attractive women, stalked them, and attacked them. Ultimately, the community felt that no one was safe, especially young women who might be the next targets. Residents decided to take matters into their own hands. Over the next few months, gun and ammunition sales skyrocketed as more people began arming themselves. Meanwhile, public pressure began to mount on the police for answers. The county sheriff appeared on a local television station, asking anyone with information about the crime to come forward. After Terry's murder was reported on the local news, police received numerous calls, but the information did not help the investigation. Initially, Terry's fiancée Karen was considered the prime suspect, but he was away on business at the time and had an alibi. The police tried to include him in the murder profile to close the case and appease public concern, but this was not possible. Terry's friends could not believe that he could commit such a crime. After his alibi of being away on business was confirmed, he was removed from the suspect list. Police spoke with Terry's relatives to reconstruct a timeline of events that took place on February 12. Terry arrived at school around 4 p.m. After leaving the university, she got into her car and drove home. Once home, she changed clothes and went shopping, again alone. Although she usually liked to invite her friends along, they were all busy that day. First, she went to the nearest grocery store to buy ingredients for a cake she planned to make for Karen to celebrate Valentine's Day. He was scheduled to return from a business trip the next morning. Store employees confirmed that they saw Terry at the checkout and even provided a receipt for her purchase. The receipt confirmed that she had purchased ingredients for baking. They determined that she left the store at around 6:30 p.m. Police questioned anyone who may have seen her at the time, looking for any suspicious behavior, such as someone following her. However, no one reported anything unusual. It appeared to be a routine shopping trip. Terry paid for her items and walked out. Terry went home and decided not to go out again, as she had scheduled a visit from a repairman the next morning to fix some wiring issues. That evening, none of the neighbors were home, and those who did hear strange noises were unable to fully grasp the seriousness of the situation. The sounds faded relatively quickly, leading people to calm down. Typically, police would look for the killer among the victim's close acquaintances. However, this time it wasn't the case. A few months ago, Terry was preparing for her wedding. Karen had given her a $5,000 engagement ring, but the police were unable to find the ring during their investigation. Initially, it was thought that the ring's disappearance could be a robbery gone wrong. However, further investigation revealed that this theory was unlikely, as nothing else was missing. Given its value, a campaign was launched to find the ring. Approximately 250 flyers with a picture of the ring were distributed to local pawn shops, including those in Fort Worth and Dallas, informing them of the missing jewelry. Despite this effort, no one reported the ring to the police. The police followed up on all potential leads, but none of them came to fruition. All of the suspects questioned provided alibis. The police focused on people with a history of violence who lived in the area. However, the investigation began to stall. Terry's relatives made efforts to promote the case. They regularly reached out to the public through various media channels. They appeared on TV and radio and distributed many flyers, but their efforts yielded no results. Eventually, the murder of Terry McAdams became an unsolved case that was filed in the archives. The Terry's family continued to seek justice, but the police lacked the necessary resources and evidence to advance the investigation. The case went cold for 36 years until 2021, when a team of experienced police and forensic experts was assembled to revisit forgotten cases, utilizing new technologies. Among these cases is that of Terry McAdams. Police used advanced DNA testing methods, allowing them to re-examine old evidence. Biological material from the perpetrator was found on Terry's underwear and bed sheets. She fought back during the attack, leaving traces of the perpetrator's skin under her fingernails. A cigarette was taken from the archives and sent for testing because the killer's saliva might be on it. This thorough analysis helped create a profile of a likely suspect. However, when this profile was checked against the database of known offenders, there were no matches. Terry's family hoped to find the killer who had been on the run for decades. Unfortunately, despite their hopes, the case remained unsolved for many more years. Fortunately, the investigation continued and eventually decided to use a new method, genetic genealogy technology, which required the assistance of the FBI. In August 2023, after exploring all possible options, the police department reached out to the Federal Bureau of Investigations in Dallas for help with the Terry McAdams case. They planned to analyze the DNA samples collected from the crime scene and the victim's body. This genetic testing aimed to create a family tree of the suspect, allowing the investigation to extend beyond the existing database, which only included known offenders. By using genealogical research, police could significantly increase the chances of identifying the suspect's relatives, particularly close ones. This method is considered very effective. At the time this study was conducted, the database had grown to the point where the probability of finding a match was close to 100%. The investigation was successful in identifying a man named Bernard Sharp, an American who had a notable history with the police in the 1980s. At the time of the crime, Bernard was 30 years old and married. He was also a neighbor of Terry, and Karen had a close relationship with him. During the investigation following the arrest, Bernard contacted the police and supported the victim's family. He provided an alibi that the police initially found suspicious, however. His wife later confirmed his alibi, leading to him being cleared of suspicion. Ultimately, all suspicions against him were cleared and the investigation continued without results. On the evening of November 3, 1985, a man called the police, claiming to be Bernard's wife's brother. He reported that he had been shot and needed assistance. After investigating, the police discovered that an armed criminal had attacked him, his sister, and her friend at their home. When the police arrived at the scene, it appeared to be a horrific massacre. He recounted that when he returned home with his sister and her friend, he found Bernard waiting for them with a gun. Bernard opened fire, killing the two women on the spot and wounding Bernard's wife's brother. Bernard's wife's brother was injured in the shooting but escaped to a neighbor's house. His injuries were not life-threatening. Bernard may not have expected his wife's brother to be there, and the shooting may have been premeditated. When Bernard realized his plan had failed, he began shooting at people. In addition to the two dead women, Bernard's wife's brother was also found wounded at the scene. Bernard was shot in the head and died from his injuries on November 3, 2008. Probably, the decision to voluntarily end his life was a factor in the tragic events that unfolded. It is now clear why the attacks on young girls in the city stopped after this tragedy. Bernard was a serial killer. During the investigation, no witnesses came forward to confirm his plans or his connection to the murders of Terry and the other girls. However, several close friends of Bernard's reported that he knew Terry's killer but did not name him. Several months after Terry's murder, Bernard was found dead after killing his wife and her friend, and seriously injuring his wife's brother. Police were unable to locate his body for an autopsy, so they had to take other measures to determine his connection to the murder of Terry McAdams. Police traveled out of state to meet with one of Bernard's registered relatives. Although the man did not want his name linked to the crime, he eventually agreed to provide a DNA sample. Forensic genealogy helped confirm Bernard's guilt. At the time of Bernard's death, police were unable to compare his DNA with the DNA found at the crime scene. They were unable to establish a connection between his previous attacks. Before killing his relatives, Bernard had only used violence and had not used a gun. Furthermore, Bernard's fingerprints were not in the police database, meaning that no matches could be found. Given the nature of the attacks, police suspect he may have been involved in other crimes in his neighborhood. He appears to fit the profile of a serial rapist and murderer. Bernard's criminal record has been turned over to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, an agency known for its crime-solving abilities. However, there has been no confirmed evidence of his involvement in any other cases. For Terry's family, identifying the killer brought them relief. After 39 years, the case was finally closed. This breakthrough was made possible by new technology. Terry's sisters appeared on a local television channel and shared their feelings about the case being solved through several interviews. After nearly 40 years, they say it would have been better to see justice in person. However, they take comfort in knowing that this dangerous criminal stopped his criminal ways long ago and cannot harm anyone again. If he had not stopped, many more innocent women could have been victimized by him over the years. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Neville and June Bamber. June and Neville became the owners of White House Farm. A Royal Air Force veteran, after many years of service, he transitioned to a position as the master of a small local court. In 1949, June married he at the age of 25, and that same year, they moved into their new farmhouse. Their dream is to have children and build a happy, close family. However, June could not get pregnant. After numerous attempts, they discovered that the issue was genetic, and they would not be able to have biological children. However, they did not lose hope, and they were able to find a way to become parents. The Bamber family adopted 2 children from an orphanage. First, they adopted Sheila, who was just 3 months old, and a few years later, they adopted 6 months old Jeremy. June and Neville cared for and educated their adopted children conscientiously, giving them all their love and tenderness. As Sheila and Jeremy grew up, they ensured they received a good education by sending them to prestigious private schools with high-quality standards. The Bambers' financial situation was very good, allowing them to take care of themselves and their children fully and comfortably. Like any family, June and Neville also faced problems in their relationship. Not having a biological relationship with your children can sometimes make the situation more complicated. However, for the most part, their family life proceeded smoothly, without any major conflicts. In 1985, Sheila was 28, Jeremy was 24, and their adoptive parents, June and Neville, had just turned 60. That summer was so peaceful, with everyone enjoying the sun and nature, until the early hours of August 7th. At 3:30 a.m., Jeremy was awakened by an unexpected phone call. When he answered, he was shocked when he heard his father, Neville, on the other line. Neville's voice was frantic and distressed. He struggled to explain that Sheila had gone crazy and have weapons. While Jeremy still didn't fully understand what was going on, the call suddenly lost connection. Alarmed, Jeremy immediately contacted the police, relaying what Neville had said. He also warned them that Sheila could be dangerous. Despite the urgency, it took the police an hour and a half to arrive at the scene. By then, it was still dark, and the house was shrouded in shadows. The area was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos Neville had described. Since firearms were reportedly involved, the police approached cautiously, adhering to standard procedures. Then, they decided not to enter the house. Instead, they waited outside, wait for the task force to come and handle it. The police positioned themselves at a safe distance from the house and used a megaphone to try to communicate with anyone inside. For more than 2 hours, police tried to contact Bamber's family, but received no response. During this time, the police asked Jeremy to explain what had happened at the Bamber household the previous day. He explained that the entire family had gathered for dinner the night before. Toward the end of the evening, there had been a minor misunderstanding, but not serious. He also mentioned that he had left a pistol and a .22 caliber carbine with his parents. Both guns were in good working order and loaded. Nearly 3 hours after the first police officers arrived, at approximately 8 a.m., the special forces entered the house. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy and somber. The team cautiously advanced, inspecting the first floor. When they entered the kitchen, they found a scene of chaos. A chair facing down on the ground, and next to it, in a pool of blood, was Neville's lifeless body. He had been shot 8 times, 6 of which hit the head, leaving him with little chance of survival. His hands and face were bruised and scraped, with a broken nose and jaw, shows that he fought back drastic against the attacker. The officers completed their search of the first floor, then, they moving upstairs. Each step had to be made with caution to avoid noise, but this is very difficult. Because the floor is old and makes a creaking sound every time it is moved. On the second floor, in 2 bedrooms, they discovered 4 more bodies. They found June, Sheila, and 2 6-year-old boys, Daniel and Nicholas, all of whom had been fatally shot. June had been struck by 7 bullets, while Daniel and Nicholas sustained 5 and 3 shots, respectively. Sheila was found on the threshold of her parents' bedroom, with 2 gunshot wounds under her chin. In total, 25 bullets were used to kill the 5 members of Bamber family. Initially, police theorized that the Bamber family members had been deliberately killed. But who could have committed such an act? Was the perpetrator an acquaintance of the family, who had long planned to harm them and then finally carried it out? Or was the criminal so clever that he tried to fool the police with a fake clue? These questions remained unanswered, prompting the authorities to immediately begin an investigation. It is remarkable that although Sheila and Jeremy were both very well educated, they grew up with completely different personalities. Jeremy was introverted from a young age, preferred solitude, and did poorly in elementary school. Sheila, on the other hand, always had many friends around her. Jeremy is hot-tempered and has difficulty controlling his emotions. Even though his parents tried to educate him, but he still did not change. Eventually, they decided to send him to boarding school, which happened in 1970, when he was 9 years old. Boarding schools in England at that time were famous for their strict and harsh discipline, applied to all ages of students. Attending such institutions was expensive, but this was not an issue for the Bambers. As soon as Jeremy entered the boarding school, he realized he could no longer behave as he had before, as any disobedience was met with punishment. Unfortunately, he made the mistake of telling his classmates that he had come from an orphanage. His friends used that information to bully him. They often taunted him about being adopted, calling him a bastard. His years at boarding school were a challenging period for him. Although they didn't teach him many good things, they did help him improve his character somewhat. Over time, Jeremy became calmer, went on to university, and successfully graduated. Neville was extremely proud of his son and even bought him a ticket to Australia. For the next 4 years, he traveled extensively across the country, spent time living in New Zealand, and eventually returned to England in 1982. Upon his return, his parents, Neville and June, asked him to work on their farm. Along with the job, they provided him with a place to live, a cottage 6 kilometers from the farm, along with a car and a monthly salary of nearly $1,000, a generous amount for the time. They wanted to ensure that he had a comfortable life and did everything they could to support him. Additionally, they hoped he would help them when they were old. June, a very religious woman, had a hard time accepting the fact that her children had different views and attitudes about religion. Throughout her life, she did everything to guide them toward what she believed was the true path and to bring them closer to God. Unfortunately, her efforts were unsuccessful. So, she had suffered from severe depression, and her mental health had greatly deteriorated. At the time, mental health issues were treated with a crude and outdated method, administering electric shocks to the patient. It was believed that this could positively influence brain function. June's depression wasn't caused solely by her son, Jeremy. Her daughter Sheila, despite her calmer demeanor, also caused her great distress. Sheila enjoyed looking at magazines featuring models in provocative poses. Sheila dreamed of becoming a model and appearing on the cover of such magazines. However, she does not support this. But Sheila's problems don't stop there. One day, Sheila announced to her parents that she was pregnant. In many families, the news might have been met with joy, but the Bamber family is not like that. Sheila was still a teenager and unmarried, which made the situation complicated. June, her adoptive mother, faced a difficult decision. Should she pressure Sheila to have an abortion? As a Christian, June could not condone abortion, but at the same time, allowing the child to be born is unacceptable. Then, June told Sheila to make her own choice, but on the condition that if she had an abortion, no one in the family would know. This makes the relationship between June and Sheila more and more tense. In 1977, despite her parents' objections, Sheila is married to Colin Caffell. They on to have twin sons, Nicholas and Daniel. Initially, their family life seemed happy, but Sheila began to suspect Colin of infidelity. Her suspicions were correct, and she eventually filed for divorce. In 1982, they are officially divorced, which had a devastating impact on Sheila's mental health. She couldn't bear the shock from the divorce, so she fell into depression, and she was eventually admitted to a mental hospital for treatment. Nicholas and Daniel were sent to an orphanage, where they stayed for nearly 2 years. During this time, Sheila's mental health deteriorated further. She became increasingly anxious, frequently spoke about ending her own life and that of her children, whom she believed were possessed by the devil. She was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Meanwhile, Sheila and Jeremy seemed to swap positions with each other. Jeremy, who was a rebel for years, now lives a peaceful and stable life. In 1985, Sheila reconciled with her ex-husband, Colin. Together, they removed Nicholas and Daniel from the orphanage and start a new life together. In August, Neville and June invited Sheila and her family to visit, so they could reunite with their grandchildren, Daniel von Nicholas. They hadn't seen their 2 nephews in a long time. They decided that the family would spend a week together, after which Colin would take the boys on a trip to Norway. On Tuesday, August 6, 1985, Colin brought the boys to the family farm. And everyone gathered at the Bamber house. The day was filled with joy. There was a family dinner, a happy atmosphere, and delicious food. Later, Neville and June asked Sheila to take Daniel and Nicholas back to the orphanage, arguing that she couldn't provide them with a proper education. This suggestion angered Sheila. She replied that she would make the decision herself. The calm atmosphere of the evening was disrupted at 8:30 p.m. Around the same time, Jeremy left the house. Barbara Wilson, the secretary at Bamber Farm, called Neville regarding a work-related matter. When Neville answered, she realized he seemed very annoyed. In the background, she could hear raised voices, as though people were arguing or upset about something. This was unusual for the Bamber family, which surprised she. However, she couldn't learn more about the situation because Neville quickly ended the call and hung up. The next morning, everyone present in Bamber's house was shot dead. Jeremy, the only survivor, was informed of the tragedy. Overcome with grief, he couldn't hold back his tears. Investigators treated him with respect, allowing him time to gather himself before beginning their questioning. Jeremy shared everything he knew, including the hardships Sheila went through, and the argument that had occurred at the dinner table on the evening of August 6, shortly before he decided to leave the house. At first glance, the crime that Sheila committed seemed to be an act of desperation and impulsivity, because at the time, she was suffering from mental illness. After hearing Neville and June's suggestion that she should return her 2 sons to the orphanage, she felt the interference in her private life was unacceptable. When she lost control, she grabbed a weapon and shot Neville, June, Daniel, Nicholas, and finally shoot yourself. Investigators believe this is what happened. However, there is one very strange detail. Sheila had been shot twice in different parts of her body. How could she have managed to do this to herself? The actions of the detectives were puzzling. They decided to burn the blood-soaked bedsheets carpet, where the bodies were found. They explained that they wanted to help Jeremy avoid the painful memories of the incident. Furthermore, the weapon discovered at the crime scene, which was a key piece of evidence, was improperly handled by the investigator. They picked it up with their bare hands without wearing gloves. A few days later, Bamber's family funeral was held, and Jeremy attended. He seemed distraught over the tragedy, weeping over the coffins of his sister, parents, and nephews. However, on that day, the investigation was reopened. Relatives of Bamber's family have expressed concerns about Jeremy's unusual behavior. Despite his tears, he made odd remarks, such as referring to himself as the boss. They found him smiling with the look of someone satisfied with victory. They reported this to police, causing police to conduct a more thorough investigation. Crime scenes need to be investigated carefully and meticulously to avoid drawing hasty conclusions. The detectives began by examining the weapon. They discovered fingerprints from several individuals, including the investigator who had handled the gun without gloves. The appearance of Sheila and Jeremy's fingerprints is not surprising. Jeremy admitted the gun was his, explaining he had purchased it for hunting. It is also understandable that Sheila's fingerprints were on the gun, as the initial theory suggested she had used the gun as the murder weapon. A few days later, Jeremy's cousin secretly went to the Bamber family home to search the house. He convinced that Sheila was not involved in the murder. By this point, Jeremy had inherited to his family home and was living there alone. During the search, the cousin inspected every room and the closet, and he found a silencer for a .22 caliber carbine. Length of the gun, combined with the silencer, made it impossible for the attacker to have turned the weapon on themselves and fired. This discovery strongly suggested that Sheila could not have been the perpetrator. If Sheila had fired the gun without the silencer, a new question arises: why were traces of blood found on the end of the silencer? Sheila, who had been shot twice and was bleeding, could not have removed the silencer and hidden it deep in the closet. This suggests that the silencer was attached to the rifle in the murders. From this point, everything started to become clear. Julie, Jeremy's girlfriend, suspects him of being involved in killing his family. She contacted investigators and shared some information. She revealed that on the night of August 7th, Jeremy had called her, saying there were problems. However, when she tried to ask what was wrong, he abruptly hung up. She also recalled that shortly before the murders, he had repeatedly complained about his family. Most importantly, she revealed that the Bamber family had drawn up a will, which stated that all assets would be passed on to their children after their deaths. This made Jeremy very angry. He did not want to share the inheritance with his sister, Sheila. In addition, Jeremy also told Julie that he wanted to kill his family and blame it on Sheila, a mentally ill person. She reported all of this to the police, not because she wanted to help the investigation, but because she was feeling angry, so she had just learned that Jeremy had a new girlfriend. However, there is no direct evidence to prove Jeremy's guilt. He tried to mislead the investigation. He gave the police the name of a suspect, a plumber he'd have hired. However, when investigators questioned the plumber, they learned that he was completely innocent. He also has a solid alibi, helped to remove any suspicion against him. As a result, Jeremy Bamber became the primary suspect. He was taken into custody due to his inability to provide an alibi. However, the police released him after failing to find evidence linking him to the massacre. Surprisingly, he was allowed to leave the country. After inheriting the property, Jeremy's financial situation improved a lot. He sold Neville's car and to Saint-Tropez, France. Upon returning to England on September 29th, he was arrested and charged with the murder of the Bamber family. The trial began on October 3rd. One of the main points raised in court was about Neville's injuries. His body showed multiple bruises, suggesting that he had tried to defend himself from an attack. The medical examiner speculated that the injuries were caused by the same .22 caliber carbine. Sheila, a petite and frail woman, it seemed unlikely that she could have inflicted such severe injuries on her father. In contrast, Jeremy appeared capable of doing so. Neville's body showed signs of a struggle, with multiple bruises. Sheila also received several blows, but there were no signs of a struggle on her body, and her nails remained intact. The defense countered these arguments, that believed that Sheila suffered from mental illness, which made her the prime suspect, capable of committing a five-fold murder. They emphasized that she grew up on a farm, was skilled at handling guns, and was an experienced target shooter. Additionally, Jeremy's lawyers highlighted that Sheila's blood was fresher than the rest of the family's, so they claiming that she ended her life after killing others. This, they argued, could have been due to guilt or the sound of approaching police cars. However, the prosecution disputed these claims. If Sheila had been the killer and then end her life, then the policeman on duty near the house, they will hear the last gunshot. However, no sound was detected. Furthermore, Sheila could not have pulled the trigger with the silencer attached, as it would have been out of her reach. The silencer was also found in a closet, rather than on the carbine where it logically should have been. The defense is in a difficult position because it has no arguments to refute the prosecution. According to the prosecution's argument, the motive for the murder stemmed from Jeremy's anger when he learned the contents of the will. In the will, the inheritance was divided equally between him and Sheila. His greed for the inheritance led him to plan a massacre. On August 6, between 10:30 p.m. and 11 p.m., Jeremy left his relative's house and went home. Later that night, he returned to their house on a bicycle he had taken from his mother, June, a few days earlier. He took a roundabout route and entered the house through an open bathroom window on the first floor. He climbed inside, retrieved the loaded gun, and went to June's bedroom. Then, he shot and killed her with 2 shots. Next, he aimed the gun at Neville, but Neville woke up and tried to defend himself, leading to a fight. During the struggle, he managed to shoot Neville. After killing Neville, Jeremy returned to the bedroom and killed Sheila and her 2 children, Daniel von Nicholas. He then staged the scene to make it look like Sheila was the perpetrator, he placing the carbine in her hands. With his crime complete, he left the house on his bike. He called his girlfriend, Julie, almost revealing what he had done, and then called the police to report that Neville had allegedly called him. However, if Neville was threatened with a weapon, he would contact the police, not Jeremy. Jeremy's actions seemed to make everyone feel strange. Why didn't he come to the crime scene immediately after Neville's call? After considering the evidence and various assumptions, the jury deliberated for 9 hours and reaching a verdict. Ultimately, Jeremy Bamber was convicted of 5 murders and sentenced to 5 life terms in prison with no chance of parole. Jeremy, meanwhile, maintains his innocence. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Marco Marialini. Marco Marialini was born on April 13, 1959, in the town of Brescia, Italy. His father worked as a builder, and his mother Maria Lini was a housewife. She was obsessed with cleanliness and constantly tidied the house. Everything had to be in its place, and any mess could cause her to have a nervous breakdown. Marco had an older sister who was 2 years older. After Marco was born, his mother felt overwhelmed and struggled to keep the house clean. She suffered from emotional distress and may have suffered from obsessive-compulsive disorder, although she did not recognize her condition and never sought medical help. A month after Marco's birth, he was placed in the care of his paternal grandparents, where he lived for 2 years. His parents eventually brought him back home, believing their situation had improved and that they could handle the challenges of parenting. Once back home, Maria attempted to care for Marco, but he was very active and often caused trouble. He didn't listen to her and frequently threw tantrums. Frustrated, Maria sometimes lost her temper with him. Although Marco's father tried to step in during these conflicts, Maria dismissed his attempts. He is a calm and gentle man who always avoids conflicts with his wife to keep the peace. In the family of Marie, a serious incident occurred. The Maria was trying to calm Marco, who was throwing another tantrum for no apparent reason and wouldn't stop. In a moment of frustration, she grabbed him and accidentally threw him out of an open window. Marco fell several floors and miraculously caught on the clotheslines located below, which saved his life. As Marco grew older, he gained weight. He didn't go on diets or actively try to lose weight, but he felt uncomfortable in his larger body. During his teenage years, he began to compare himself to his friends and felt disgusted by any girl who weighed more than he did. Additionally, Marco wanted his girlfriend to have a strong sex drive, equal to his own. However, finding someone who met these criteria was challenging. Most of the girls he met were either too heavy or not up to his standards. Because of this, Marco had a hard time finding a partner until he was 19, when he met Lucia. Marco and Lucia met in 1978. Lucia was short and weighed 100 pounds, and Marco fell in love with her petite figure and sought a close relationship. However, when Lucia first undressed in front of Marco, he was disappointed in her figure. Despite this, Marco continued to date her because he appreciated her calm, modest, and composed demeanor. Meanwhile, he continued to search for his ideal partner. A few months after starting their relationship, Marco joined the army and was stationed in Pisa, Italy. Believing that he would quickly find new love elsewhere, he stopped contacting Lucia. After a few months, when Lucia started dating someone new, Marco realized that he didn't want to lose her. He contacted her again and even proposed. Marco admitted that he decided to marry Lucia because he thought he could change her to fit his preferences. They got married in 1980, and soon after, Marco focused on controlling Lucia's weight. He believed that 45 kilograms was too heavy for a woman, so Lucia agreed to go on a diet. Marco restricted her food intake and weighed her regularly. When she lost weight, he praised her and expressed his love. However, if she gained weight, he became extremely harsh. After a few months, Lucia reached a dangerously low weight of 33 kilograms, which made Marco happy. Then, unexpectedly, Lucia became pregnant despite her low weight. Marco accepted this and allowed her to eat freely, he realizing that she shouldn't be restricted during her pregnancy. As Lucia's belly began to grow, Marco became unhappy with it. Their intimacy began to falter. During this time, Marco often fantasized about women who were very thin, like skeletons. He often fantasized about being able to see the woman's spine. As Lucia entered her final months of pregnancy, Marco began dating other women, especially those who were not only thin but also anorexic. However, he soon realized that these women were not right for him. Because they have unpleasant personalities and, most importantly, lack interest in intimacy. They make their own choices about food and eating, which is contrary to Marco's desire to have complete control over his diet. In 1981, Lucia gave birth to a daughter, and a year later, their family welcomed their second child. After giving birth, Lucia gained a significant amount of weight, causing Marco to increasingly distance himself from her. He found her post-pregnancy body unattractive. He eventually decided to divorce her, wanting to ensure that their children would stay with their mother. The divorce was amicable. Marco then began looking for a new partner, a journey that lasted nearly 10 years. During this time, he opened his own antique shop. In 1994, dating through newspaper ads began to become popular. Marco, 35, posted an ad describing who he was looking for. A very thin woman, not anorexic, aged 18 to 50. He received responses from 21 women and invited them on a date. Among them, he was most interested in Monica, who was from Sicily and 5 years younger than him. She was 1.72 meters tall and weighed 45 kilograms. She was friendly and outgoing. Curious about Marco's unusual ad, she decided to respond. Monica and Marco began to see each other regularly. While Monica viewed their relationship as casual, Marco wanted something more serious. He tried to convince her to move in with him. After a while, Monica decided to move in with Marco. In the same year, he started facing challenges at work. He had fallen into debt, and his antique shop was losing money. To help him, Monica lent him 76 million lira, the amount for which she sold the house. This was a large sum, considering that the average salary in Italy at that time was around 2 million lira. Although Marco proposed to Monica, she rejected him. At first, they lived as a normal couple, but after a while, Marco began to interfere with her diet. He said that a 1.72 m tall girl weighing only 33 kilograms was beautiful. But he set her goal weight at 38 kilograms. Monica agreed, Marco still secretly hoping she would reach 33 kilograms. It is unclear why he set that number. Marco limited Monica's meals to once a day, usually consisting of a plate of green salad or vegetables. He monitored the food in their house, marking the cereal jars and making sure Monica did not eat anything without his knowledge. He weighed her several times the day and became angry if he noticed her gaining a significant amount of weight. If her weight increased, he would force her to vomit and sometimes resort to physical violence. On weekends, the couple often eats out. Marco enjoys a hearty meal, ordering an appetizer, a second course, and a dessert. Monica, on the other hand, limits herself to a vegetable salad without dressing or unsweetened green tea. This is her routine, even on holidays. After a few months of dieting, she reached her goal weight, but soon after, her weight started to climb to 40 kilograms. Monica kept her diet a secret from everyone, including her parents and friends. As she began to lose weight, her relatives noticed and began to ask about her health. To avoid their questions, she changed the subject and eventually isolated herself, cutting off all contact with her friends and ignoring their calls. Over time, her health deteriorated. She felt weak, had no motivation to get out of bed, and her period stopped. Monica was constantly hungry and obsessed with food. She resorted to stealing, sneaking small dry crackers that Marco never counted. One day, she even ate a whole raw onion. When the Marco discovered that food was missing, he punished Monica severely. He forced her to have sex, physically abused her, and made her sleep on the floor. After 2 years of enduring this treatment, Monica felt completely drained. She finally made the decision to leave the house. When she told Marco that she wanted to end their relationship and return to her parents, he responded by saying that she would have to kill him for that to happen. He then threatened her with brutal revenge if she attempted to escape. In the spring of 1996, Marco and Monica went to a restaurant. Marco ordered a plate of spaghetti, while Monica chose a green salad and asked for no oil or seasoning. While they were waiting for their food, Marco said he needed to go to the bathroom. After Marco left the table, Monica suddenly took his plate of spaghetti and started eating it ravenously. When Marco returned from the restroom, he became extremely angry at Monica's actions. He snatched the plate from her hands and demanded that she calm down. In response, Monica rushed into the restaurant's kitchen, where the cooks and waitstaff were busy. She grabbed a plate of food and began eating with her hands. Marco found her there and brought her back to their table. He shouted at her and then slapped her hard across the face. The restaurant staff and other customers were puzzled and merely watched the chaotic scene in silence. After returning home, Marco decided to punish Monica. He stripped her and told her to sleep on the floor while he went to the bedroom to sleep comfortably in his warm bed. That night, Monica picked up a heavy hammer and attacked Marco while he was sleeping, hitting him on the head before fleeing the house. Hours later, Marco woke up with a severe headache and saw blood near him. Realizing that Monica was gone, he ran to his neighbor, who called an ambulance. Marco was taken to the hospital. Fortunately, he was not seriously injured and recovered fairly quickly. The police arrested Monica and took her into custody. During the interrogation, Marco defended Monica, acknowledging that he had been cruel to her. Marco said that there had been some misunderstandings in their relationship and that they would work things out. At trial, Monica was found guilty and sentenced to 2 years of house arrest. She then moved to her parents' home in Domodossola, a city in northern Italy, 200 kilometers away from Marco's home. During her house arrest, Monica was still able to use a phone. Although she never contacted Marco, he called her regularly. At first, he seemed concerned, showing concern for her well-being. However, over time, his calls became too frequent. During one conversation, Marco confessed that he could not live without her and wanted to see her again. Monica rejected his advances, but he persisted. In 1997, Marco wrote and published his first book, The Anorexia Hunter. The original cover photo that Marco chose featured a healthy, chubby man holding a skinny woman. He based the characters on the American cartoon Popeye the Sailor. However, due to copyright issues, Marco was unable to use the image, so the publisher released the book with a different cover. Marco has publicly stated that the book is an autobiography that reflects his real life. He expressed that he felt deprived of love and care since he was a child. He has a complicated relationship with his mother. Although he hates her, he sometimes feels affection for her. Marco describes his father as a weak and indecisive man. Marco wrote about his relationship with Lucia. In the book, he called Monica Barbara. He discussed the theme of control and power over girls. According to the story, the author killed Barbara. During the book's launch, Marco publicly declared himself a monster who needed to be stopped. An editorial writer who was present at the event found Marco's tone very offensive. After reading the book, the editorial writer went to the police to express his concerns. However, the police dismissed his report, believing that Barbara's murder was completely fictional. At the time, Marco had no criminal record, making it impossible to charge him based solely on the content of his book. When Marco's autobiography was released, Monica was still under house arrest for another year. Marco sent her a signed copy of his book with the message, "Love and Hate." He continued to call her, and Monica recorded their conversations on a dictaphone. Concerned about his mental health, she urged Marco to see a doctor. During his therapy sessions, Marco opened up about his obsessive thoughts and troubling fantasies, revealing the truth about his life. He was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for several weeks, but after his treatment, he returned home feeling disillusioned with medicine, realizing that the medication had not helped him. In 1998, Monica, who was 29 years old, was finally released from house arrest and allowed to travel around the country. Marco continued to contact her, pleading for a meeting. Although Monica initially refused, she realized that he wouldn't give up easily. Eventually, she agreed to one last meeting with him but specified her conditions. It had to be during the day in a crowded place. On July 14, 1998, Monica met Marco at a small beach in Verbania on the shores of Lake Maggiore, where young couples were swimming and sunbathing. They talked for a while, but then Marco began to pressure her to return to their previous relationship. Monica stood firm in her refusal, and in response, Marco started to threaten her. Monica and Marco were sitting on the shore when she suddenly stood up and ran away. Marco quickly caught up with her and knocked her to the ground. She screamed for help, but he covered her mouth with his hand. Although there were many witnesses, no one intervened. Marco then took out a knife and stabbed Monica 22 times, killing her on the spot. The witnesses called the police, but by the time the ambulance and police arrived, Marco had already swum out to sea. Officers using a lifeboat on the beach caught Marco. During questioning, Marco admitted to his crime, claiming that he had no intention of killing Monica. He said that he came to the beach hoping to convince her to return to the relationship. If she refused, he planned to kidnap her using his car parked nearby. Police found ropes, chains, knives, locks, and duct tape, suggesting a premeditated plan that ultimately failed. Marco denied wanting to run away after the murder. He mentioned that he tried to end his life but failed. During the investigation, comic book drawings were discovered in his home. In these drawings, he depicted himself as a large ball and the girl as a thin line. His artwork expressed mockery towards women. During his conversation with the journalist, Marco showed no remorse for his crime, stating that he felt he had no other option and did what he had to do. However, Marco acknowledged that he posed a danger to society. Marco Mariolini was found to be sane and guilty of murder, he receiving a 30-year prison sentence. While incarcerated, there was a time when he refused to eat, took laxatives, and lost weight down to 44 kilograms, but later he regained it. He was a problematic inmate, starting a fire in his cell and causing minor trouble for the guards. As a result, he was transferred to different prisons multiple times. Marco wrote letters claiming he should not be released because he would kill again, but he later denied this and then wrote similar letters once more. Italian director Matteo Rone was inspired by Marco's horror stories to create the film First Love. Released in 2004. Although it did not receive major awards, it drew attention to Marco's past. In 2021, there was an article written about Marco's early release and it was revealed that he had been transferred to a mental hospital. In late 2002, journalists approached Marco for an interview. During the interview, he expressed a desire to forget his past experiences with women. The journalists noticed that he seemed confused, often unable to answer their questions. His mental state may have been affected by the effects of medication. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Douglas. Sarah Douglas was born in 1987 in Sacramento, California, into a family of 5 siblings. They always get along and help each other. From an early age, her parents commented that she was a girl with a gentle and cheerful personality. However, during her teenage years, her personality changed significantly. She started associating with a group of troubled teens and to spend all her free time with them. As a result, she quickly dropped out of school. At the age of 19, Sarah started dating a boyfriend named Nicholas. In 2007, when she was 20, she became pregnant. By this time, her relationship with Nicholas was deteriorating, and they often fought over minor issues. The arrival of their child only increased the conflict between them, causing them to decide to separate. Nicholas moved to Santa Rosa, a city 150 kilometers away, where he began a new life with another woman. Despite being separated, he still cares for their son, and the two share custody. Sarah found herself in a challenging situation. As a young single mother, with a young child to care for, and education level is not high, she had difficulty making ends meet. Her parents were busy raising their own younger children and couldn't offer her much support. Although her mother and sister helped whenever they could, it still wasn't enough financially. She needed to find a way to earn money. Eventually, Sarah decided to work as an escort, drawn in by the good pay and flexible hours. She has an attractive appearance and quickly became famous in this industry, helping her earn a good income. However, she did not know much about the risks involved in this profession. After a few years as a call girl, she met Orville Fleming, a man who gave her the stability and security she had always craved. She hopes to quit her current job, find a husband, as well as a father for her son, and finally get her life on track. She believes so blindly in her dream that she does not notice the dangers around her. Orville Fleming was born in 1958 in California. Before he met Sarah, he was a happy husband and father. He dedicated over 30 years to his career as a fire chief, earning the respect of his community. He served for 24 years, including 3 years in Modesto. In 1993, he became a fire engineer with the California Department of Forestry. Thanks to his excellent performance, he was promoted to captain and became a battalion chief in 2012. Throughout his career, Orville built an impressive resume and reputation. He also worked part-time as an instructor at a fire academy, where he shared his valuable experience and trained future firefighters. Through hard work, he earned about $130,000 a year, enough to enjoy a wealthy lifestyle. When his children were grown, he and his wife could enjoy a comfortable life and their own pleasures. However, beneath the facade of this seemingly happy family lay a troubling secret about Orville. He spent most of his money on encounters with young escorts, as he found family life dull and craved excitement with attractive young women. He met these women through dating sites and escort services, and that led him to Sarah, a 20-year-old girl, 30 years younger than him. In his intimate relationships with these young girls, he sought the variety that was missing from his long-term marriage. His wife is a discreet woman, so he often turns to call girls to satisfy his private needs. After meeting the beautiful Sarah online, Orville began dating her regularly. She charges $300 an hour for each meeting. He became very fond of her, and their encounters began to occur more frequently. She opened up to him about her struggles, earning Orville's sympathy, which gradually evolved into love. He loved Sarah so much that he decided to divorce his wife to start a new life with her, and she agreed. Orville decided to take action immediately. He soon had a conversation with his wife, leading him to leave her and their 2 children to be with his mistress, Sarah. He purchased a house in a quiet suburb near Sacramento. Sarah joyfully shared the news with her family, believing that her life would improve and that she could finally create a stable family. She promised Orville that she would quit the escort service and never return to that line of work. Everything seemed to be going well. However, Sarah's family was concerned about the age difference between her and her boyfriend. She was only 24 years old, while her boyfriend Orville was 54 years old enough to be her father. However, he seemed to be a thoughtful family man, which helped ease their worries. They saw this as a happy time in Sarah's life and supported her, not wanting to affect her happiness. At the start of their life together, everything seemed perfect and joyful. Orville tries to arrange the house so that Sarah and her son feel as comfortable as possible. She gave up her job as a call girl and started a normal life, becoming a housewife. Their life felt like a fairy tale, a perfect home, and a loving relationship. Sarah wishes to have a closer relationship, and she also wants to marry Orville. Her dreams seem to come true when Orville presented her with an expensive engagement ring, adorned with a large diamond. She accepted his proposal, but her happiness was short-lived. Orville turned out to be very jealous and controlling. He was possessive and wanted to monitor her every move, making her report on everything she did. He realized that she was financially dependent on him, and he used that to control her life, making her completely attached to him. The relationship lasted several years until Sarah grew impatient. Orville exhibits obsessive behavior and wants to control the people she interacts with, even in public. This led to suspicions and arguments between them. Additionally, conflicts arose with Orville's wife, Megan, who was still legally married to him. He filed for divorce, but the process took a long time, giving her more time to pressure him over financial matters. By early 2014, the situation had become very tense. Megan frequently calls Orville to ask him to pay off his debt and give her more money. She was particularly upset about the large sums he spent on call girl service, which often left Sarah in tears. At this point, Sarah and Orville's relationship had significantly deteriorated. She began spending more time with her mother and sister, and during one conversation, she admitted that she wanted to end the relationship due to the mounting problems. Sarah realized that continuing the relationship was a mistake. However, she did not think that her decision to leave him could lead to serious consequences. On Wednesday, April 30, 2014, Sarah's day started like any other. She sent her son to visit his biological father for a few days and planned a vacation with her mother and sister. They first went to a casino where they enjoyed themselves until 11 p.m. During that time, Orville kept calling and texting her, but she chose not to respond. He was upset that she ignored his request not to have fun while he was away. As midnight approached, Stephanie, Sarah's sister, took her back to the house she shared with Orville, and they said their goodbyes. Once inside the house, Sarah immediately noticed a strong smell of gas. She went to the kitchen and saw that the gas burners left on. Alarmed, she called her sister Stephanie to let her know that Orville had neglected to turn off the gas. It was obvious he wanted to poison her. Suddenly, a scream was heard, startling she. Orville had unexpectedly shown up, disrupt her and Stephanie's phone call. Then, all Stephanie could hear was her terrified screams. Assuming it was just another argument between lovers, Stephanie decided to hang up and go to bed. Early in the morning, Stephanie decided to call Sarah to find out what had happened the previous night. She dialed Sarah's number, but was surprised when there was no answer, as Sarah usually stayed in touch. As anxiety grew over Sarah's lack of response, she and her aunt went to Sarah's house around 8 a.m. to check. They rang the doorbell and knocked for a long time, but no one answered. Just as they were about to leave, her aunt tried the door handle, and to their surprise, the door opened. This was unusual behavior, which made them even more worried, but they decided to go inside. Once inside, they found the living room in disarray, with furniture out of place and items scattered everywhere. They cautiously made their way to the bedroom, hoping to find Sarah. At that moment, a neighbor heard them screaming from the window. He saw them running out of Sarah's house, clearly terrified. When he asked what was wrong, they told him there was a human body inside the house. The neighbor immediately called 911 to report the situation. By 9 a.m., officers were on the scene. Several officers worked together to calm and interview the witness. In the bedroom, the officers discovered clear evidence of a struggle. A young woman lay face down on the floor, showing no signs of life. She had injuries on her body and neck, including cuts and a sheet tied around her throat. Blood was splattered on the bed and walls. In the bathroom, they found a bloody towel thrown into the washing machine. All the windows were tightly closed. They quickly secured the crime scene and started their investigation. Forensic experts arrived to gather evidence, and the body was taken to the morgue for an autopsy to determine the cause of death. The witnesses identified Sarah Douglas, who was 26 years old when she died. The autopsy revealed that she suffered at least 14 stab and cut wounds, likely inflicted with a kitchen knife. There were also signs of suffocation on her neck, which was determined to be the cause of death. Forensic experts discovered multiple bruises and evidence of beatings on her body, indicating she had fought back fiercely. Blood tests showed that at the time of her death, she was neither drunk nor under the influence of drugs. Sarah's aunt and sister informed detectives that she had previously worked as a call girl, but quit after meeting Orville. Despite their age difference, she believed he was a good man who could help her build a better life. However, their relationship had become strained in recent months, and she had decided to end things with him. Additionally, Sarah's sister Stephanie informed detectives about everything she heard on her cell phone the night before. It was likely that Orville attacked Sarah and killed her out of jealousy. As a result, he became the primary suspect in the brutal murder, and a warrant was issued for his arrest. Despite their best efforts to search for him, they still couldn't find him. He was not at home, at work, with his ex-wife Megan, or with his relatives. He had gone into hiding, prompting the police to place him on a statewide wanted list. Just a day after the search began, Orville's official car was found abandoned near a house, but there was no sign of him being there, nor any clues as to where he might have gone. Police have gathered detailed information about Orville and issued a wanted poster, stating that he is a particularly dangerous criminal. The database indicated that he owned 2 pistols, but they were not found in his car or at the murder scene. It is believed he was carrying them and may resist arrest. Citizens were alerted to stay vigilant and report any suspicious individuals, while also being advised to exercise caution and avoid confrontations with Orville, who may be armed and very dangerous. The search operation lasted over 2 days. During this time, family and friends gathered near Sarah's home, closely following the search and hoping for any news. They came to honor her memory as a victim of domestic violence. The media also took a keen interest in the case, tracking the police investigation closely. Orville's colleagues were equally shocked by the incident. They knew him as a kind, positive person and a professional with a stellar reputation who had consistently demonstrated his integrity on the job. However, it is worrying that he disappears soon after the death of his young lover Sarah, raising suspicions about his involvement. 5 days later, Orville was fired from his position as head of the fire department because he failed to report to work without any explanation. Given the circumstances, this was merely a bureaucratic formality. Meanwhile, the search is being extended to areas where he may be hiding. He is experienced in outdoor activities and regularly participates in challenging hikes. His endurance and survival skills are evident in extreme conditions. He is known for training in remote wilderness areas for long periods of time that few people know about. Even though there is a lot of information surrounding the case, the situation seems to be becoming more tense. Orville's wife, Megan, decided to make the situation more serious. She claimed that he and other members of the California Fire Brigade often invited escorts to the fire station for entertainment. Megan said she had seen videos showing these women arriving at the fire station and having fun inside the fire trucks. She also mentioned that a woman named Sarah had been present on a couple of occasions. The police received information regarding the situation and visited the fire station to speak with the employees and verify the details. However, they were unable to locate any video recordings or photographs that Megan had mentioned. Megan could not provide this evidence either, leaving the rumors unconfirmed. In addition, Megan also said that during the time Orville was having an affair with Sarah, he had run up a large debt due to his addiction to prostitutes. She asked him to pay the debt, but he never did. She also mentioned a diamond engagement ring that she suspected was fake. She also convinced the police that Sarah, Orville's mistress, had been stalking her, alleging that Sarah frequently called and threatened her. As a result, she sought a restraining order against Sarah, but this claim could not be substantiated as there was no evidence of harassment. It appeared that she may have fabricated these accusations to further tarnish Sarah's reputation in the eyes of the public. After 2 weeks of thorough investigation, the court denied Megan's request for divorce. On May 26, 2014, Orville was finally captured at a bus stop near where his official car was found. He had been hiding in the forest, but was spotted when he ventured out to buy food, despite having shaved his mustache and attempted to disguise himself. He was taken into custody without issue. He did not have a gun and surrendered to police. After his arrest, he needed special supervision. On May 20, 2014, Orville appeared in court. He claimed he could not afford a lawyer, but maintained his innocence. 10 days after the initial hearing, the city's road patrol began a new investigation into illegal activities involving members of the fire department where Orville worked. By October 2014, after the hearing had officially lasted more than a month, Orville formally pleaded not guilty. Sarah's family was shocked by Orville's arrogance especially when he winked at the public defender. The prosecution detailed the troubled relationship between Sarah and he. He is portrayed as a jealous man who wants complete control over Sarah's life. He prohibited her from working, took away her personal bank account and mobile phone, and restricted her from using her own vehicle. Meanwhile, an investigation is underway into misconduct at the fire department where Orville worked. On December 29, 2014, the investigation confirmed that there was inappropriate sexual behavior between firefighters after hours. Although the video recordings mentioned by Megan were never located, but the investigation led to 16 firefighters being placed on administrative leave. In June 2015, the Orville trial entered its final stages. The defense presented defendant Orville in a favorable light, arguing that he was a victim influenced by Sarah, a prostitute with drug and alcohol problems. They argued that he was exploited and pointed out that he did not recall the argument with Sarah. This strategy was intended to help reduce the charges against him. As part of this strategy, the defense also sought to discredit Sarah. On the night of the incident, a violent argument erupted, which was overheard by her older sister, Stephanie. However, Orville described experiencing a dissociative state, likening it to being a zombie, as he went to the kitchen to get a knife. He then returned to the bedroom and stabbed Sarah multiple times. Next, he began strangling her until she showed no signs of life. He maintained that he could not remember the details, stating that the incident played out in his mind like disjointed fragments. Orville attempted to sway the jury by expressing deep remorse for his actions. The prosecution aimed to demonstrate that he was not telling the truth. They presented recorded interrogations where his statements contradicted his testimony during the trial. This discrepancy damaged his credibility and led the court to pursue a first-degree murder charge. On June 24, 2015, just 2 days after the debate ended and just before his birthday, Orville Fleming was charged with second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Sarah's death had a devastating impact, not only on her, but also on those around her. A few months later, her brother Leroy, who was very close to her, died, unable to cope with the grief of losing his younger sister.